Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes God of Destruction? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Third-person POV. The year is 21XX and the world has been taken over by the supernatural powers known as quirks. As of right now, a whole 80% of the world have quirks. As for the other 20% though, they have no powers, or quirks as we call it. At first sight this wouldn't seem like a problem, and for most it isn't. 50% of quirkless people, so 10 out of the 20%, are in the North and South America continents, 35% are in the continent of Europe, 14.5% are in Africa, and finally, 0.5% are in Japan. Japan is the country with the most heroes along with the most formidable, the next contender being America, and being quirkless is almost unheard of. Due to this, the quirkless were just used as stepping stones in Japan, since it was such a low percentage of people no one really batted an eye. Every job done by a quirkless could be done many times better by someone with a quirk. They couldn't become heroes. The quirkless in Japan are doomed to start. The suicide rate of the quirkless in Japan is 98.75%, with those who grow into adulthood normally dying at some point in a villain attack since they cannot defend themselves. They were just seen as useless and a disease by most people in Japan, but no one would ever admit to how the quirkless was treated. Why are we talking about this? Well, it is because of our protagonist Izuku Yagi. Currently he is traveling in the car with his family. The car itself was enough to hold 5 people. Of course we have the driver and the other person in the front seat. After that we move over towards the back with 3 seats directly alongside each other. On the right-hand side was a petite green-haired male known as Izuku Yagi. Directly adjacent to him was his sister, slightly shorter in height but with longer hair, Izumi Yagi. The front of the car carried 2 adults, both being the parents of these exquisite children with hearts of gold. One of them, the one in the driver's seat, had baggy blonde hair and a very narrow physique. This was Toshinori Yagi, who carried the secret identity of All Might, the #1 hero, whom only one of the members of the car knew. That would be his wife, who sat in the passenger seat. She was a tall yet toned green-haired woman, reminiscent of her children, known as Izuku Yagi or Green Esper, which was her hero name. Like Toshinori, their children didn't know of this secret. As the car drifted along the tracks of the road, which wasn't busy yet not completely empty either, the car was filling with impatience. This was clearly told by the son in the back row. "Izuku, oh hurry up dad. I can't wait," he said excitedly as his dad chuckled at his excitement. It was adorable to see, but he needed to divert that impatience into a friendly conversation, otherwise it would become one of those drives filled with, "Are we there yet?" No one wanted a drive such as that one. "Toshinori, we'll be there soon. What quirks are you hoping for?" This question sparked wonders between the 2 children, yet both of them seemed to have instinctive answers. Before Izuku could answer, his sister cut in and spoke with just as much excitement as her brother had prior to her interruption. "Izumi, I think I'll have a quirk like mommy's. Except it'll be just as strong as dad's." Upon hearing this, Toshinori's wife gave a smirk of victory which was clearly directed towards him. He played along and gave a pout which clearly didn't mean anything, yet it got a chuckle out of her. "Inko, that's a point to me honey." Before the victory lasted for too long though, Izuku seemed to butt in as if to make up for when Izumi did it towards him. A play of revenge if you would. "Izuku, I want to be a hero like All Might, so a quirk like daddy's would be cool." Toshinori gave a smugger smirk in return as Inko replied with a playful pout of her own, resulting in high-spirited laughs all around the black car they drove. Before the conversation could proceed any further, they arrived at the hospital to test their quirks and were escorted to the testing room for said purpose. The hospital was definitely of an impressive size, posing about 3 different stories with at least 10 different rooms per story. The doctor walked into the waiting room that the family was waiting in as he beckoned them to follow him, to which they did. The kids couldn't hide their excitement, and as much as Toshinori and Inko would deny, they were very excited to see their kids' quirks as well. These 2 would likely become some of the top heroes after all. Soon after following the doctor, he opened a door for them and sat on a single chair. Opposite him was a row of 4 chairs, and in between them all was a screen on the wall. Toshinori and Inko sat on the edges while Izuku sat next to his father and Izumi sat next to her mother. When the doctor coughed, though, the children stopped talking, yet their excitement was still evident. "Doctor, I have good news and bad news. Which would you like first?" The family was shocked to hear this, but upon thinking about it for even a moment, what would the bad news even be? That the quirk was a mutation, perhaps that it was deadly upon use. They were 2 of the top 10 heroes. They could easily help their adorable children learn to control their quirks. "Toshinori, the bad news can't outshine the good, so let us hear that one first." The doctor nodded slowly as he turned to face Izuku. The kid who held more enthusiasm than anyone he had ever seen. Did he truly want to blow out this kid's happiness? Whether he wanted to or not, he still had to either way. With a deep breath, he spoke while preparing himself for devastation. "Doctor, kid, do you want to be a hero?" At this, Izuku rapidly nodded as his eyes visibly sparkled. Izuku had wanted to be a hero above all else. In fact, it was his #1 goal in life, so of course he wanted to do so. Izuku, yes. More than anything in the whole world. The doctor seemed to take yet another deep sigh before pulling up a picture on the projector of his joints. There seemed to be 2 joints on his pinky toe. The parents already knew what this meant. However, it still had to be explained to the clueless children in the room. "Doctor, your quirkless son." At this the world seemed to stop. No one said anything, and Izuku had a look as if all his dreams had been crushed, probably because they had been. No one dared to say anything for a few seconds while Izuku processed what the doctor had just told him. Quirkless, but that would mean he broke his promise. His promise to Izumi, his promise to Shoka, his promise to Katsuki, his promise to Katsumi. He had failed them all because he was pathetic enough to be born as quirkless. As Izuku was lost in his thoughts, the doctor let out an attention-grabbing cough. Before too much longer, the doctor then spoke again. "Doctor, however, your daughter has an incredibly powerful telekinetic quirk. Her current limit is about 200 pounds, maybe 250 if she heavily strains herself. It's on par with Green Esper herself, if not more. You have a bright future ahead of you, dear." The family, minus Izuku, immediately celebrated and started to hug Izumi. They left Izuku there in his disappointment and didn't even comment about him. His despair that would make even the toughest of shells reduce to that of rubber. He was at his most vulnerable state ever, and he was just a 4-year-old. To this, the doctor walked to Izuku and put a hand on his shoulder in a reassuring manner. "Doctor, kid, being a hero while quirkless is going to be difficult, but note how I didn't say impossible? You will just have to put in much more effort than everyone else. You will have to put yourself at death's door multiple times if you wish to be a hero. Are you prepared to do that?" Upon hearing this, some life came back to Izuku's eyes as he nodded. Just the notion of one person believing in him was enough, and this person was a doctor no less. That meant he knew what he was talking about, so of course he would take it to heart. "Izuku, why, sir? I'll be a hero just like All Might." The doctor smiled at his reaction as the family then left as happy as could be, with Izuku already mentally recovering from his quirkless status. When the door closed, the doctor was left to himself and the files in front of him. Said doctor then sighed. "Doctor, the first quirkless in 5 years. The kid is gonna have it extremely rough." The Yagi family were currently driving back. Izuku was already seeing the difficulties of being quirkless. Izumi was being praised left and right while Izuku was ignored. Even if he spoke, they pretended that he didn't exist, except for Izumi, who gave an icy cold glare his way. He knew it would be rough, but for it to already start was something he did not expect. Yet he wouldn't let this get him down. Instead, he kept his head held high. Once they arrived home, Izuku instantly rushed to his room and started noting down possible training patterns along with noting down heroes' abilities as he usually did in his space-time. Unknown to Izuku, a certain sister of his was spying on him through the door before tutaying and walking away. A few hours went past and Izuku smelt dinner. He walked downstairs and only saw 3 plates, those being eaten by Inko, Toshinori, and Izumi. It was his favorite meal of katsudon. As his stomach growled, he spoke curiously since his 4-year-old mind didn't understand all the social repercussions of being the quirkless child that he was. "Izuku, What's for dinner, Mom? Instead of his mom answering, his sister seemingly snapped as she stood up while slamming her hands on the table. When this happened, she then turned towards her brother and spoke in a slightly raised voice. Izumi, do you have to be so selfish? You can make your own. Upon hearing this, the parents turned to face Izuku, who was no longer their son, but simply a burden they had to carry. Seeing their daughter snap, the parents also stood up as they spoke in a stern voice. Inko, young man, what did you do to your sister to upset her so much? He was so confused. Why was his parents taking her side when he hadn't even done anything? Was it truly such a crime for one to ask for some dinner, their favorite dinner at that? Being as bewildered as he was, he spoke back with a slowly forming stutter. Izuku, I didn't do anything. Of course, this didn't go down well with his parents, as Izuku's father raised his voice even higher than Inko's. This gave it that fatherly boom that made you follow their command no matter what. Toshinori, we don't take well to lying in this household. Go to your room for the night. No dinner for you. He spoke sternly as Izuku looked like he was about to cry. However, he held it in as he walked into his room and went to sleep hungry that night. Not only that, but he almost stained his pillow with the amount of tears that came out of his mouth. While he was suffering, he was so clueless. Little did he know that this was only the start of the years of torture which would ensue from something he had no control over. His family then continued to talk happily like nothing had happened. Izuku woke up to see that it was half an hour past when school was supposed to start. He gasped as he started to get dressed into some new clothes. He was panicked as he had fallen into a routine with his sister. He seemed to fear the worst as he looked around while getting changed. Izuku, didn't Izumi wake me up like she normally does? He asked towards himself as he rushed downstairs and saw his mother having breakfast with his father. Not seeing Izumi there but instead an empty plate, he let out a sigh of relief and just assumed that his sister had left for school. That didn't help that he was starving though, along with being a growing boy. Izuku, Mom? See, can you make me some breakfast and drive me to school, please? Inko glared at him as she spoke with almost an unparalleled anger. Izuku had never seen Inko this mad. Inko, why are you this late? You don't deserve breakfast, and I'm not driving you. This is your fault, so you can walk. Izuku just nodded in shame as he got his shoes on and began the 40-minute walk to school. He knew he would just get shouted at again if he tried to reason with her, so all he could do was obey. The mood around the school was a bit different. This was mainly visible with the main four. That being the Bakugou twins, Izumi, and the number 2 hero's daughter. Only one of them had the answers, so it was obvious that this would get questioned. Katsumi, hey, where's Izu? The first question of possibly many to come. Izumi didn't even have time to answer as Katsuki released his thoughts into the current state of matters. Katsuki, now that you mention it, he's never late. This was true. Izuku had arrived at school every day with time to spare. This was of course thanks to Izumi, but she didn't do it this time, of course. Shoka, is he okay? These three were Izuku and Izumi's friends. However, Izuku wasn't there right now. They had all just discussed their quirks in as much detail as possible. Shoka had half fire and half ice, Katsuki had explosion, and Katsumi had basically the same thing. If you couldn't tell they were twins before, that would be the icing on the cake. Upon hearing their questions, Izumi let out an audible groan of annoyance since she even had to think about that quirkless failure. Izumi, oh, he's probably sulking in his room after he found out he was weak enough to be quirkless. Shoka and Katsumi stayed silent while Katsuki just laughed. Since the quirkless were rarely ever born in Japan, people just saw it as a pathetic disability. Katsuki and Izumi seeing it as something to laugh at, while Shoka and Katsumi saw it as something which could break someone mentally if not treated or helped. Katsuki, you're kidding, right? Why would he break our promise of being top heroes like that? Sharing the same viewpoints as each other on this matter, Izumi and Katsuki's conversation instantly sparked between the two in a positive manner. Izumi, I know, right? And he still wants to be a hero. Katsumi and Shoka let out a sigh of relief since they wanted their best friend to never give up on his dreams. This may have been the case to them, but on the other side of things this infuriated Katsuki and Izumi to no end. Katsuki, he's too pathetic to be a hero. It'll just embarrass us. Why don't we beat him and show him just how far below us he is? That way he'll stop and learn his lesson." Izumi gasped as she smiled and nodded. This was a perfect idea to her and she was more than happy to carry out. They hadn't even ran it by the other two, however before Katsumi and Shoka could object, Izuku walked in panting from the long distance he had to walk to school. "Izuku, hi everyone," he said weakly, gaining concerned looks from Katsumi and Shoka while getting annoyed and irritated looks from Izumi and Katsuki. "Katsuki, what are you doing here, Deku?" Izuku gasped as he took a step back instinctively. Katsuki had never had this level of difficult, but note how I didn't say impossible? You will just have to put in much more effort than everyone else. You will have to put yourself at death's door multiple times if you wish to be a hero. Are you prepared to do that? Upon hearing this, some life came back to Izuku's eyes as he nodded. Just the notion of one person believing in him was enough, and this person was a doctor no less. That meant he knew what he was talking about, so of course he would take it to heart. "Izuku, why sir? I'll be a hero just like All Might." The doctor smiled at his reaction as the family then left as happy as could be with Izuku already mentally recovering from his quirkless status. When the door closed, the doctor was left to himself and the files in front of him. Said doctor then sighed. "Doctor, the first quirkless in 5 years. The kid is gonna have it extremely rough." The Yagi family were currently driving back. Izuku was already seeing the difficulties of being quirkless. Izumi was being praised left and right while Izuku was ignored. Even if he spoke, they pretended that he didn't exist, except for Izumi, who gave an icy cold glare his way. He knew it would be rough, but for it to already start was something he did not expect. Yet he wouldn't let this get him down. Instead he kept his head held high. Once they arrived home, Izuku instantly rushed to his room and started noting down possible training patterns along with noting down heroes' abilities as he usually did in his space-time. Unknown to Izuku, a certain sister of his was spying on him through the door before tutaying and walking away. A few hours went past and Izuku smelt dinner. He walked downstairs and only saw 3 plates, those being eaten by Inko, Toshinori, and Izumi. It was his favorite meal of katsudon. As his stomach growled, he spoke curiously since his 4-year-old mind didn't understand all the social repercussions of being the quirkless child that he was. "Izuku, what's for dinner, Mom?" Instead of his mom answering, his sister seemingly snapped as she stood up while slamming her hands on the table. When this happened, she then turned towards her brother and spoke in a slightly raised voice. "Izumi, you have to be so selfish? You can make your own." Upon hearing this, the parents turned to face Izuku, who was no longer their son, but simply a burden they had to carry. Seeing their daughter snap, the parents also stood upus. They spoke in a stern voice. "Inko, young man, what did you do to your sister to upset her so much?" He was so confused. Why was his parents taking her side when he hadn't even done anything? Was it truly such a crime for one to ask for some dinner, their favorite dinner at that? Being as bewildered as he was, he spoke back with a slowly forming stutter. "Izuku, I didn't do anything." Of course, this didn't go down well with his parents as Izuku's father raised his voice even higher than Inko's. This gave it that fatherly boom that made you follow their command no matter what. "Toshinori, we don't take well to lying in this household. Go to your room for the night. No dinner for you." He spoke sternly as Izuku looked like he was about to cry. However, he held it in as he walked into his room and went to sleep hungry that night. Not only that, but he almost stained his pillow with the amount of tears that came out of his mouth. While he was suffering, he was so clueless. Little did he know that this was only the start of the years of torture which would ensue from something he had no control over. His family then continued to talk happily like nothing had happened. Izuku woke up to see that it was half an hour past when school was supposed to start. He gasped as he started to get dressed into some new clothes. He was panicked as he had fallen into a routine with his sister. He seemed to fear the worst as he looked around while getting changed. "Izuku, didn't Izumi wake me up like she normally does?" He asked towards himself as he rushed downstairs and saw his mother having breakfast with his father. Not seeing Izumi there but instead an empty plate, he let out a sigh of relief and just assumed that his sister had left for school. That didn't help that he was starving though, along with being a growing boy. "Izuku, Mom?" See, can you make me some breakfast and drive me to school please? Inko glared at him as she spoke with almost an unparalleled anger. Izuku had never seen Inko this mad. Inko, why are you this late? You don't deserve breakfast, and I'm not driving you. This is your fault so you can walk. Izuku just nodded in shame as he got his shoes on and began the 40-minute walk to school. He knew he would just get shouted at again if he tried to reason with her, so all he could do was obey. The mood around the school was a bit different. This was mainly visible with the main four. That being the Bakugou twins, Izumi and the number 2 hero's daughter. Only one of them had the answer, so it was obvious that this would get questioned. Katsumi, hey, where's Izu? The first question of possibly many to come. Izumi didn't even have time to answer as Katsuki released his thoughts into the current state of matters. Katsuki, now that you mention it, he's never late. This was true. Izuku had arrived at school every day with time to spare. This was of course thanks to Izumi, but she didn't do it this time of course. Shoka, is he okay? These three were Izuku and Izumi's friends, however Izuku wasn't there right now. They had all just discussed their quirks in as much detail as possible. Shoka had half fire and half ice, Katsuki had explosion, and Katsumi had basically the same thing. If you couldn't tell they were twins before, that would be the icing on the cake. Upon hearing their questions, Izumi let out an audible groan of annoyance since she even had to think about that quirkless failure. Izumi, oh, he's probably sulking in his room after he found out he was weak enough to be quirkless? Shoka and Katsumi stayed silent while Katsuki just laughed. Since the quirkless were rarely ever born in Japan, people just saw it as a pathetic disability. Katsuki and Izumi seeing it as something to laugh at, while Shoka and Katsumi saw it as something which could break someone mentally if not treated or helped. Katsuki, you're kidding, right? Why would he break our promise of being top heroes like that? Sharing the same viewpoints as each other on this matter, Izumi and Katsuki's conversation instantly sparked between the two in a positive manner. Izumi, I know, right? And he still wants to be a hero. Katsumi and Shoka let out a sigh of relief since they wanted their best friend to never give up on his dreams. This may have been the case to them, but on the other side of things this infuriated Katsuki and Izumi to no end. Katsuki, he's too pathetic to be a hero. It'll just embarrass us. Why don't we beat him and show him just how far below us he is? That way he'll stop and learn his lesson. Izumi gasped as she smiled and nodded. This was a perfect idea to her and she was more than happy to carry out. They hadn't even ran it by the other two, however before Katsumi and Shoka could object, Izuku walked in panting from the long distance he had to walk to school. Izuku, hi everyone. He said weakly, gaining concerned looks from Katsumi and Shoka while getting annoyed and irritated looks from Izumi and Katsuki. Katsuki, what are you doing here, Deku? Izuku gasped as he took a step back instinctively. Katsuki had never had this level of malice around him before. Since it was directed at him, it was only Izuku who felt it. Izuku, Deku? What does that mean? He asked nervously. However, instead of being annoyed, Katsuki seemed more than happy to fill Izuku in on his place below him. Katsuki, it means someone who is useless and can't do anything, just like your quirkless self is. There were two people clearly against this, and the more outspoken one of the two instantly made it known with her shock. Katsumi, Katsuki? Katsuki and Izumi seemed to ignore her shock while Shoka just clenched her fists at the scene. Izuku hearing this felt his eyes water up as he spoke out yet again. Izuku, why are you being so mean? I'll still be a hero like All Might. When he said that, he was flung into a wall with telekinetic energy by Izumi. Her hand was raised in his direction as he gasped in pain. He didn't understand why they were doing this. Was it truly that bad of a thing to be quirkless? Was he really that bad of a person? Izumi seemed pissed that he would even mention All Might's name from that peasantry mouth of his. Izumi, you think you can compare with us? You're just a Deku and nothing more. Teach him, Katsuki. Katsuki smirked as he punched his open palm with a small explosion coming out. Izuku was instantly fearful as he clenched his fists and closed his eyes in an attempt to brace for the oncoming beating. Katsumi and Shoka didn't actually expect him to hit Izuku, let alone square in the face. Izuku immediately started tearing up upon impact as Katsuki scoffed. Katsuki, seriously? You're crying. You are the one who broke out, promise, damn Deku, he said as he slammed his fist into Izuku's gut, making him cough up a bit of blood. He would have toppled over had Izumi not had him pinned against the wall with telekinesis. Katsuki clearly had a lot more planned since he pulled his fist back again with explosions coming from it. Before anything else could happen though, Katsumi and Shoka both spoke in unison. Katsumi/Shoka, let him go. As the other two heard this, they backed away and let Izuku go to his knees, which caused them to scrape against the floor. As he did, Katsuki actually spat on him before speaking. Katsuki, that'll teach you, don't bother trying to be a hero, Deku. Katsuki and Izumi then walked away while the other two stayed. The acts that their friends committed were awful, yet they both knew that wasn't going to change anytime soon. They went to Izuku, but before they could help him, he stood up while crying, clearly fearful of the two as he started to back away. Izuku, stay away. You'll hurt me, Jay, just like they did. It was understandable why he was like this. He had just been beaten and betrayed by two of his closest friends. One of them was his sister. Before they could say anything though, he ran out of the building in an attempt to escape the two and escape from yet another beating. The duo was about to go after him to make sure their friend was doing okay, but the bell was rung signaling it was time for next lesson. They both sighed at this before turning to each other before looking at the door he ran out of again. Katsumi. He's strong, he'll be fine on his own. Shoka didn't doubt this. In fact, Izuku had a stronger will than even Katsuki in her opinion. Yet how much of this would even he be able to take if he was in Izuku's shoes? Shoka. If you say so, we need to at least text him after class though. Katsumi nodded to this as the duo headed to lesson. Neither of them would have ever known how important that decision was in regards to giving Izuku his own strength. Izuku ran, and ran, and ran, tears constantly spilling out of his eyes as he couldn't believe how the others and his family had betrayed him. Thinking back on it, Katsumi and Shoka seemed like they actually wanted to help, but it was all too much for a 4-year-old boy. He had been betrayed twice and he didn't want to risk a third. Wouldn't you rather try and be safe than sorry? He couldn't recall how long he ran for. Minutes? An hour? He ran for about 4 hours before reaching a forest. It was lush and beautiful, almost untouched by civilization entirely. As he looked around, it came to his attention that he still hadn't ate, and upon his body being beaten up and being forced to run for 4 hours, he simply passed out on the grassy floor face first. That was definitely going to cause an injury, yet not one too great since it was only grass. A few minutes after he passed out, a figure came across his body and let out an audible sigh. Can't leave a bloodied child out here to die. Izuku didn't know how long he had been passed out for. However, when he woke up he knew he was in a different location. There was a warm fire a few meters away from him. With this he was also resting under a blanket in a cave. He also seemed to register a small bruise that was covering his forehead, likely from his fall one would assume. However, he seemed to get cut out of his thinking by a voice from across the cave. It seems you've finally awoken? Izuku turned to face where that voice came from as he rubbed his eyes to get his vision back to normal. There seemed to be a black spiky-haired male sitting on a rock a few meters away from him. His muscles were like that of legend. Only top heroes and people of myth had a body that godly. Speaking of godly, his clothing choice seemed to also represent that of which a deity would wear. Izuku, who are you? Where am I? This being across the cave chuckled at his reaction before crossing his arms and standing up. There was no reason to hide any of this. It wouldn't put the world in danger or anything. Vegeta, my name is Vegeta. I should ask what the hell you were doing passed out in a hive forest. You had blood leaking from your mouth along with multiple bruises. Izuku slowly sat up with his backpack still on as he started to remember the past 24 hours. Instantly tears started to fill his eyes as Vegeta knew he had unintentionally hit a sore spot. Kids would be kids, yet he had never raised a human kid. Trunks was always pretty strong, so the closest experience he had would have been Bulla, but he was still pretty inexperienced when it came to this type of stuff. Vegeta, don't cry, kid. I forgot how difficult it is to deal with kids. The F would Kakarot have done in this situation? This all went over Izuku's head as he was wiping his own tears away. Vegeta then walked to Izuku and went on one knee before placing a hand on his shoulder just as the doctor had the day before, the only light Izuku had recently. It gave him that small sliver of hope as it had before. Even if Vegeta hadn't said anything, the memory itself seemed to do enough for him. Vegeta, what has happened to make you react like this? Should he tell this random stranger about everything he had gone through? That would be inconsiderate, right? And this was a stranger danger as they say. Yet even though this man looked like he could break Izuku in two, said boy trusted him. Upon clearing his breath, Izuku started to tell him everything, how he was diagnosed as quirkless, how his family neglected him or shouted at him, how his best friends betrayed him and beat him incredibly hard and how he ran away. Vegeta seemed in some slight shock at how humans had gone so low. Maybe he would need to commit to his act as a destroyer more often. While he wasn't as lazy as Beerus, he definitely didn't destroy as much as the previous destroyer did. Vegeta didn't even know what the concept of a quirk was, so he decided to say what would help Izuku. Vegeta, I am quirkless as well if that makes you feel better. Anyways, stay here for a moment, you clearly need to eat before anything. I'll be back in a few seconds. Another quirkless. Did he also go through suffering throughout his life? So many questions, yet Vegeta then walked out the cave before Izuku could answer. What Izuku didn't expect was for the ground to start violently shaking moments after as of an earthquake of quite a large scale had just occurred. Curious about what this was, he threw his unzipped bag onto the floor and ran outside to see Vegeta's hand outstretched with a huge energy blast coming from it. Izuku looked in utter shock. In front of Vegeta now laid an entirely roasted cow which he effortlessly carried over his shoulder before looking at Izuku with a prideful smirk on his face. If he truly was quirkless, how was he able to lift something that heavy as if it was nothing? Could Izuku attain such strength? Izuku, I thought you were quirkless? The young boy questioned, clearly his mind thinking Vegeta had lied to him. That was better than building up hope only for it to shatter after all. Yet Vegeta replied with an answer Izuku definitely wanted to hear. Vegeta, I trained is all. He stated, leaving Izuku in shock as Vegeta walked into the cave. As he did, he saw the exposed hero analysis book from the unzipped bag. He walked over to it and he opened it and looked through the detailed notes that this 4-year-old had made along with the training regimes he had wrote out before crossing out with the words, not good enough, next to it. These training routines were definitely well thought out and the kid seemed to know his stuff. Perhaps Vegeta could help this interesting kid while giving himself the entertainment he had been lacking recently. Vegeta, hey kid, come here. He commanded as Izuku got cut out of his daze and nodded, walking over to Vegeta. The fact that Vegeta was holding his hero analysis book didn't go unnoticed by the young boy. Izuku didn't have time to question it, however, since Vegeta then spoke. Vegeta, you wanted to know who I am? I'm a god of destruction and have been for 1,400 years. I specialize in the power of destruction. If you wish to be a hero so badly, how about I train you in the ways of destruction? Hearing this and seeing what Vegeta could do made Izuku smile. He didn't even seem to question his age, which was oddly heartwarming, as he nodded instantly. Izuku, I accept. While Vegeta would have been happy with this, Izuku was still a 4-year-old boy. Vegeta needed to be firm and let Izuku know what he was getting into before not allowing him to back out. Vegeta was many things. Strict was one of them, but heartless wasn't. Vegeta, oh ho, are you sure? This training will push you to the brink of death countless times a day. You will also be required to go to school, as I imagine you will need to know that shit to be a hero. Since I haven't been here in many centuries, I don't know what they teach anymore. Knowing this, do you still accept? Izuku thought about it for a moment, but then remembered what the doctor said. He knew he'd have to go through hell and back even for a small chance at his future of being a hero. He nodded as he looked at Vegeta with nothing but determination in his eyes. Izuku, please teach me the ways of destruction, Vegeta-sensei. Vegeta gave a prideful yet evil smirk as he threw Izuku the entire cow first. It barely missed Izuku while making a crack in the floor and thus left him alive. Vegeta, eat first. You need to have actual energy going through your body if you want to train it. We'll start tomorrow. For now, eat that and then I'll take you home. Izuku nodded with a Tai-sensei before they both settled down and started to eat the cow, one of them with a much higher appetite than the other. Third-person POV. Izuku was currently walking through the town. He had added Vegeta's contact to his phone and was smiling from ear to ear. About an hour ago he had finished eating with Vegeta. They talked for a small bit about training, his circumstances, and how it would be best to FO about this. Eventually they came to a solid agreement and Vegeta said he would message him the schedule soon. Luckily for Izuku, he had just been texted the schedule for their training. Izuku couldn't hold back his excitement as he ecstatically looked through it. Monday, training. Tuesday, Wednesday, training. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, training. Sunday. Izuku was really interested about what the theories part of it involved. From what Vegeta had let on, he seemed to explain that it would depend on the day. Sometimes it would be battle theory, sometimes it would be destroyer theory. The whole aspect excited him to no end and he... Extra. Hey kid, stop muttering. It's creepy. Izuku gasped and covered his mouth as he walked past some older male before blushing from embarrassment and bowing. Izuku, sorry sir, he said before continuing to walk. Just because he had this new training, it didn't mean that his normal life could be neglected. He still had to go to school every day and go home. Sometimes, Vegeta did say he had to learn to defend himself. However, during the early stages he said he wasn't opposed to helping him out every now and then by giving him a place to spend the night. The horror that was school though, that was all on Izuku. Izuku, he said he'd heal my wounds though, so it's fine. He soon started to approach his house and as he did, he was tackle-hugged by two people making him blush furiously. These two people were the ones he ran out on earlier due to fear of huge amounts of rejection. That being Shoka Todoroki and Katsumi. The two had worry plastered on their face as well as feeling glad that Izuku was actually okay. Shoka, Izu, Katsumi, Baka, you can't just run off like that in the middle of the day. Izuku instinctively flinched at first due to the fear of getting beaten, verbally abused, or possibly worse. It scared him to no end. He even threatened to have tears spill out of his eyes. However, upon seeing this, the two females hugged their friend as they spoke in a calm and reassuring tone of voice. Shoka, we won't hurt you like Katsuki and Izumi have. His expression lightened upon hearing the comfort of Shoka's voice, and following suit, Katsumi joined in straight after. Katsumi, yeah, we're gonna become heroes together and fight back. Izuku visibly teared up even further by this and hugged them back. He needed the affection after being denied what every child should be given. He started to walk home with Katsumi and Shoka. They both went to Katsumi's house after some discussion. It was needless to say that this night was filled with comforting and tears. Monday. Izuku was nervous about going to school due to the fact that he may be late. However, Shoka and Katsumi agreed to wake him up so a repeat of yesterday didn't happen. He was beyond shocked that they had actually agreed to do this since he had been betrayed by everyone else. Even though they were comforting him the night before, it was as if his trust had been completely broken. Surprisingly, they actually did as the blonde one smiled at him. Katsumi, come on Izu, don't want to be late again. Izuku nodded to this as he sat up, about to walk to his wardrobe and get his clothes out. This was interrupted by Shoka speaking though. Shoka, we even got your clothes out, she said as she pointed to the pile of folded clothes on the floor. Izuku smiled at this small act of kindness before nodding. Izuku, thank you, I'll meet you outside in a minute. The two females nodded, walking out of the house. They both shared a glare at Toshinori and Inko before happily waiting outside for their best friend who swiftly joined them in their walk to school. The school day had gone by pretty peacefully compared to the tragedy that was yesterday. To say Izuku's mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour due to fear of being beaten again would be an understatement. Luckily, Izuku wasn't beaten up again by Izumi and Katsuki. However, he was called degrading names by those around him, names such as Deku which Katsuki came up with. It was needless to say that Katsumi and Shoka were giving death glares the whole time, which immediately shut those bullies up since they wouldn't dare challenge two of the 4 strongest people at the school. As they walked out of school, Izuku smiled and walked in a different direction to the duo since he had to secretly go and train with Vegeta for the first time. He turned around and waved at the two with a bright smile on his face. Izuku, thanks you too. I'll see you tomorrow. The girls smiled seeing his positive attitude today. They both hated how upset he was yesterday and vowed to do everything in their power to make sure that wouldn't happen again. Katsumi, see ya tomorrow, Izu. Izuku blushed from the nickname which made Katsumi giggle, however Shoka just sent him off with a more simply farewell. Shoka, see you, they said as they waved each other goodbye. Izuku waited for the duo to leave before nodding to himself. He pulled up his phone and hovered his finger over the message button for a small bit. After taking a deep breath, Izuku then messaged Vegeta saying he was ready for his training. As soon as he did, the god of destruction teleported in front of him and swiftly teleported again without any interaction at all. When Izuku looked around, they seemed to be in a completely white void which spanned endlessly. Izuku spent a lot of time inspecting the building they were in as well since it was quite off. Vegeta gave him a small bit of time to do so, letting him see the beds, the infinite fridge and to let him stare into the void. After about 5 minutes Vegeta then tapped Izuku on the shoulder to interrupt him from his thoughts. Vegeta, to be blunt with you kid, you'd rather be dead once I'm done with you today. If you're too weak you will die. This is your last chance to turn back. Izuku visibly sweat dropped at this but he slowly clenched his fist and looked up at Vegeta with determination plastered across his face. If he stayed as a weak and useless quirkless, the chance of him dying would be high anyways, so in his mind it was a worthy trade-off. Izuku, if I die, then I wasn't worthy of this in the first place. Don't go easy on me Vegeta-sensei. Vegeta smirked at this reaction before nodding his head. Maybe this kid truly was the effort, not many 4-year-olds were willing to just die after all. He showed the dedication that Vegeta himself displayed from a young age. Vegeta, good answer, now as soon as we step into this void, the gravity around you is going to get 10 times heavier. With that, the air is a quarter as thick as it is on Earth. Finally, the deeper we go the worse the climate conditions. Izuku stayed silent for a moment doing the math before figuring out his legs would have to carry at least 300 pounds. He would have to surpass Izumi's limit to even stay upright. Izuku, wow, did you think my body can handle that? That signature evil grin appeared on his sensei's face again as he spoke. Vegeta, you better hope so, he said as he fired a gust of wind at Izuku pushing him into the void area, his body instantly falling to all fours as he gasped in pain. His body was starting to flatten of his own but he was determined to not let his stomach hit the floor. It was easier said than done though since he was struggling heavily with his forearms and legs. Izuku, Tiki, this is insane. Vegeta stepped out into the void and it didn't even affect him in the slightest. Izuku was gobsmacked at this. It distracted him for a moment and pushed him down a bit further. Vegeta, get up brat, what happened to don't go easy on me? Don't tell me you're backing out already, he said as he stood over Izuku like nothing had changed. Izuku felt tears going down his face from the pressure alone. He was struggling with his life just not to go lower. Seeing this, Vegeta then folded his arms and spoke. Vegeta, you have 3 minutes to stand on your feet. If you don't then I will leave you in here and destroy the exit, leaving you to stay here until the day you die. Izuku just realized how hard this would be. Every second that Vegeta counted down made him worry more. It was as if Izuku was bound by chains keeping him to the floor, possibly one for each negative thing that had happened in his life. One for him being quirkless, one for the betrayal of his parents, another for the betrayal of almost everyone at school and another for the fact that Izumi and Katsuki turned on him. It was as if Vegeta saw this clearly, but soon Vegeta reached 90 seconds. At this point Vegeta decided to try something which made Izuku properly wake up. Vegeta, I guess Bakugou was right about you. You are just going to die as a weak and useless Deku. Izuku gritted his teeth as he started to talk while his body slowly raised up. The mention of his name in this private environment sparked rage which he had never felt before. After being a good person for 4 years with questionable things happening, there was bound to be pent-up rage. It was releasing itself in the form of anger and untapped strength. Izuku, I'm many things. Weak, quirkless? He managed to get up onto just one knee as Vegeta started to smirk in pride. It seemed this method of training would work. Vegeta didn't expect Izuku to be as prideful as he was, but it seemed that Izuku wanted to surpass Katsuki and he was all there for it. Any motivation is good motivation in a destroyer's eyes. Izuku, awkward, but I'm not accepting that Kacchan was right about me, he said as he finally stood on both feet, however they were bent pretty hard as his arms also dangled down. His arms were not touching the floor though and he was stood on his legs. Vegeta had reached 5 before Izuku stood up like that. Just attempting to stand had taken the breath out of him. He knew his training was going to be difficult but this was a level that he didn't know was possible. Vegeta, good. It seems you are worth the effort after all. Be proud, most without a quirk wouldn't even be able to manage this. Now, our end goal is getting you into that UA high, that is in 11 years so we will take this in baby steps. First you will learn to stand in this gravity for multiple hours, then walk, then run, then sprint, then you will exercise in this gravity. Followed by that we will go deeper, and only then will you finally start training against me. Hearing this explanation made sense to Izuku, just as he was about to take it, something in his mind struck and he had to ask an important question. Izuku, right? Wait, when are you teaching me about destruction? The question was to be expected, after all that is what he was promised to learn. Vegeta, on every theory day, however you will have to figure it out yourself. With that, you likely won't be accessing it until you start training with me. The reason for that is that you need to train your body to the peak of what a normal human can be. Theoretically there is no limit, however the more you train the harder it is to get stronger. To be honest, you probably won't be able to use much destruction even when you get into UA. Izuku nodded in understanding, and thus began their hellish training for the next 10 years. Izuku followed the schedule and even went beyond it, though he got shouted at Vegeta each time. Soon enough, there was only 10 months left until the entrance exam and today was the theory day. Izuku was currently in school. Over the past 10 years he had gained quite a nice figure with quite a bit of muscle. It was a given and bound to happen since Vegeta's training was just that hellish. He was never not tired, but the rest days allowed him to not completely be overworked. He wouldn't learn anything like that after all, and it seemed Vegeta knew this. Katsumi had decided to grow out her hair, picture is in the info chapter, while Katsuki kept his short. Shoka also decided to cut her hair, picture is in the info chapter, and Izumi had grown hers out. Bakugou and Izumi still bullied Izuku while Katsumi and Shoka would always try and defend him. Izuku never could fight back though, even though he could probably put up a decent fight. Even with all this training he was still developing, plus, he hadn't even started to learn about destruction yet. His base strength was probably stronger than most people, however their quirks pushed them over the edge. Izuku's family had continued to ignore, neglect or abuse him for the past 10 years as well. Although Vegeta wanted to act out on it, he never did. Speaking of Vegeta, Izuku was now sparring against him and getting some combat experience. Izuku was never able to put damage on Vegeta, but it helped all the same. But enough about that, it was time for class to start. The teacher walked in with a bunch of paper in his hand. Teacher, now, you're all third years so it's about time you started thinking about your futures. I would hand out these career applications, but... He then threw them into the air as he gave a carefree smile. A sign of a teacher who should probably lose his job, but the students would never complain since it worked out for them. Teacher, you all wish to become heroes, don't you? In response, everyone but the main 5 started using their quirks. Not many of them were actually that impressive, even Izuku could probably beat them in a fight now, likely even 2-on-1. Teacher, yes, you all have wonderful quirks. However you know it's against the rules to use them in school hours. Of course, this discussion about quirks brought out the ego in the explosive bastard himself. With his feet on the desk and hands in his pockets, he spoke with unrivaled levels of arrogance in his voice. Katsuki, hey teach. Don't lump me in with these losers. The teachers had all grown used to Katsuki's arrogance. They allowed it and allowed his bullying since he was the single strongest student the school had ever gotten. So they fed that ego and nourished it so that they could profit when he made it big. Teacher, young Bakugou, you wish to go to you, don't you? At this, he grew a prideful grin which could rival even Vegeta's. He jumped up onto his desk and let explosions come from his hands before exclaiming his plan to the class. Bakugou, yep. I'll get into UA with top marks. I aced the written exam already. With my strength I'll become the #1 hero and one of the richest people in the world. No one doubted that he could pull it off, although they hated that he could, besides his girlfriend Izumi that was. Yes, girlfriend. They had been dating for about 4 years now, two of the strongest students at the school, and they bullied whoever they pleased. Teacher, oh right, the other Bakugou, Todoroki, and both the Yagis wished to apply as well. It was reasonable for Izumi, Shoka, and Katsumi to get into UA due to how absurdly powerful they were compared to everyone else. However, no one knew about Izuku and his training, so they started laughing at him. Izumi, you still want to be a hero? She asked as her hair floated up, signaling that she was about to use her telekinesis on Izuku. Izuku was prepared to finally show himself to the class. He was going to be studying after all. He had studied Izumi's moves enough to at least dodge 2 attacks. Before he had to dodge though, Shoka stood in front of him and gave a glare at Izumi. Shoka, stand down Izumi. Izumi stood down with a tut, and while Izuku was thankful, he also hated it. He was treated like he couldn't do anything by himself from his 2 closest friends. He appreciated it, but he wanted to show them that he was capable. But that's how most days went. At the end of the school day, Izuku was packing his stuff away along with his 13th hero analysis journal. Before he could though, it flew out of his hands and his collar was grabbed by Katsuki. Katsuki, what ya gonna do now that those beaches aren't here? Izuku was visibly angry at this comment. However, Izumi dragged him out of his thoughts after looking at the book. Izumi, Hero Analysis 13. I thought we told you to stop. Before Izuku could reply, he was sent flying into the wall with a surprising amount of pressure. Izumi's limit was always rapidly increasing. Some of the doctors even theorized that she had the strongest telekinetic quirk to exist. He was very slowly coming out of it, which was admirable in its own right. However, Katsuki used his explosions to propel his fist into Izuku's head, sending him back into the wall. Even with his training, that still hurt a lot. Katsuki, that should teach ya? Izumi giggled as she used her quirk to shred up his journal before leaving hand in hand with Katsuki. Before he walked through the door, Katsuki turned around to face the battered and bruised Izuku. Katsuki, you know, if you want a quirk so badly, you could always take a swan dive off of a roof and pray for a quirk in your next life, he said as he and Izumi laughed in response before leaving Izuku to himself. Izuku had trained his mental state pretty high, so comments like that didn't affect him. It was the physical torture that was worse. He was bleeding from his head and pretty close to passing out. However, he got a text from Vegeta asking if he was ready. Izuku simply responded with a thumbs up emoji since he was too tired to text. As he sent that, Vegeta instantly teleported in front of him and sighed at the sight in front of him. Vegeta, you need to stand up for yourself. You know that you could put up a decent fight against them. Izuku had a bit of blood dribble from his lips as he let out a small tets before speaking in turn. Izuku, I know, but it's against school our rules. Let's just head to the chamber and get on with theory. Vegeta reluctantly sighed before teleporting Izuku to Beerus's planet. This is where they went for their theory days. Vegeta would have gave a senzu to Izuku, but over the constant bullying and all, they only had one left. If Izuku was to accidentally use destruction, that is when Vegeta planned to use it. Vegeta stood on top of a small cliff as his mentor once did, while Izuku stood a few meters behind him. On this planet the wind was pretty tame yet still there, giving a gentle breeze which blew both of their hair. Vegeta had one eye closed and was pointing his finger at something in the sky, which caused Izuku to question it. Izuku, sensei, what are you dash? While Izuku had been getting more confident, today was an exception since he didn't know what he was doing and he had just been beaten up. His confidence and pride had definitely grown in general though. Vegeta, how much of your life has been ruined by you being quirkless? The question took Izuku by surprise. Why would this matter? It was a pretty easy question to answer though, so he did so to the best of his ability. Izuku. Hard to say, but it's given me T2 of my friends still, but surely I must have committed some sin in order to deserve this. Vegeta always knew that Izuku believed he had done something wrong to deserve this, yet he wanted Izuku to work through this mostly on his own. However, he decided that questioning it wouldn't hurt. Vegeta, sin? Izuku, This injustice didn't exist until the quirk industry came around to start and weed out the quirkless though. Vegeta, so you're trying to blame someone else for your apparent sin? Izuku shook his head at this. He was giving reason for why the quirkless got bullied as a whole, not him in specific. Izuku, not in the least. In pursuit for control, those with quirks started to rampage. The quirk industry didn't help, however they had already started to end and hunt the quirkless before that. Vegeta leaned his head over his shoulder to face Izuku at this. It clearly rubbed him the wrong way. Vegeta, so it was the quirkless' destiny to be wiped out then? Izuku let out a sigh of disappointment before begrudgingly nodding at this question. Izuku, as unfortunate as it is, most likely. A simple tut came from Vegeta as he folded his arms, disappointed at Izuku's submissiveness to his fate. Vegeta, ridiculous. Not seeing the point in this, Izuku decided to keep talking and move to another subject. Izuku, but never mind that, the quirkless aren't of your concern. Vegeta then went in his face and pushed him down with almost no effort. It was from Ki Force itself, which Izuku had learned pretty well by now. Even with this though, Vegeta's raw strength still surprised him. Vegeta, I'm saying that's ridiculous. This took Izuku by surprise as he tilted his head at Vegeta in a comedic manner. Izuku, what do you mean? I thought today we were going to learn about battle theory. What does the history of the quirkless possibly have to do with that? Vegeta went back to the hill and pointed his finger at some sort of planet or moon thing. Vegeta, that's wrong. Today we're learning about destruction. And for your information, it matters plenty. Vegeta's finger then glowed purple as a purple energy blast fired out of it onto a nearby planet. It then engulfed the planet before expanding and exploding, leaving Izuku in shock. Izuku would have gone flying back had Vegeta not set up a key barrier around them, and Izuku knew that. Surprisingly though, he hadn't actually seen Vegeta destroy a planet yet, so this was a surprise. Izuku, is that technique destruction? He questioned, wondering if he could achieve such power, but Vegeta just responded with a rough and prideful response. Vegeta, that was just a small glimpse of what I can do. Immediately back with the questions and a possible muttering spree, Izuku started to rapidly talk. Izuku, how can I acquire such pow dash? Vegeta then sped past Izuku and grabbed his face before slamming him into the ground. Vegeta was getting quick to spot these muttering sprees, which was part of the reason he did that just now. It hurt quite a lot, but Izuku still stayed conscious. That in itself was extremely commendable, even if Vegeta was holding back an absurd amount. Izuku, what's the meaning of this? Vegeta then decided to use this opportunity to try and teach Izuku. He gave a harsh yet truthful truth. Vegeta, as long as doubt weighs down your soul, this power will never be yours to wield. This confused Izuku. What could he possibly mean by doubt? It made no sense to him. Izuku, doubt? An audible groan came from Vegeta as he stood up off of Izuku and continued to teach. Vegeta, you're feeling guilty for something you had no control over, along with not seeing your past for what it truly was. That's awfully self-centered of you. Izuku's eyes widened as he was then thrown into a nearby tree with ki pressure alone. Izuku slowly got up from the attack as Vegeta spoke confidently. Vegeta, still think it was destiny? You're just gonna accept that the quirkless should perish? Go on, try me. I'll obliterate you. Izuku gritted his teeth as he clenched his fist before running towards Vegeta to try and engage him in combat. To say Izuku was destroyed was an understatement. He currently laid face first in the floor, yet still conscious as Vegeta spoke once more. Vegeta, everything that everyone did in the past, whether they be the ones who betrayed you or the quirkless or the quirk-given ones of them past, what's it got to do with you now? As long as you're trapped by the past, you'll never manage to grow past this point. Izuku got up and charged Vegeta again. He threw a punch at him, however Vegeta grabbed it and opened his hand at Izuku's stomach. Immediately Izuku's sweat dropped expecting a punch, but something else entirely happened. Vegeta, destruction. A pretty big explosion happened at Izuku's stomach as he went flying about 100 meters, landing on the floor with the center of his shirt no longer existing. Vegeta instantly was in front of Izuku as he spoke. Vegeta, My mind's always on destruction and nothing else. That's why there's no limit to my power. Listen, if you really want this power, you're gonna have to destroy any stray thoughts and recreate yourself from scratch. Before creation comes destruction. Get it? Izuku looked in shock as if he had just figured it out. Vegeta smirked at this before speaking. Vegeta, the rest of today will be you trying to learn destruction. You won't eat until you manage to pull it off. Use that as a nice motivator. Start with smaller objects, like rocks scattered around from where I hit you and where you landed, and thus began the new chapter of Izuku's training, mastering destruction energy. Izuku Yagi, marksman sorcerer. So real quick, I did skip Izuku learning to use ki as it was probably easier than you think. He managed to get it surprisingly quickly. Now that's settled, onto the chapter. Third-person POV. Shoka and Katsumi were walking with each other as their houses were roughly in the same place, just a different turn last minute. They had been walking with each other for about an hour after a nice day of school, after school training and some ice cream. Their conversation had lasted a long while. It had gone from quirks to Katsuki to currently Izumi. As they were mid-conversation, Katsumi randomly spoke out a topic on her mind since they were talking about Izuku's sister. Katsumi, hey, have you noticed that Izuku has been getting stronger recently? Shoka seemed to think about it for a moment and realized that he was filling out his clothes more in a muscular aspect. With this, he was also able to resist people's attacks better than before, along with having pretty high endurance in P. She also realized that Izuku was barely taking in pain from Katsuki and Izumi's verbal abuse. He was getting confident in himself. Shoka, he also seems to be getting more confident in himself. Whenever we hang out, that stutter and awkwardness is basically completely gone. As she said, the stutter from Izuku was almost entirely gone unless he was genuinely surprised or embarrassed. Neither of which happen too often, so it may as well not exist. Katsumi, instead it seems to be replaced by pride. I'd say it's a good thing. Katsumi had a small blush on her face at this since she always saw a need to protect Izuku, but if he truly was getting strong, she'd be able to view him as a rival and maybe even more instead of someone who has to take care of him like a mother. While thinking about this, Shoka seemed to take notice. Shoka gave it a few moments before asking something with her extremely blunt nature. Shoka, you also have feelings for Izuku, don't you? She bluntly and stoically said. It took Katsumi a moment to realize what was actually said. Seeing her confusion, Shoka repeated what she said and Katsumi now knew what was said. For once, Katsumi was stuttering and trying to grasp at straws until something clicked in her head. Something about the way she phrased that was off quite a bit. Katsumi, wait, you said you also have feelings. You like Izuku as well. The faintest of blushes appeared on Shoka's face as she nodded before speaking again. Shoka, are we competing then? Or are we sharing him? They both went into thought at this. While they would like to have him to themselves, they also know that Izuku wouldn't dare choose one over the other. They were also best friends, so it was better than some random person sharing Izuku. Katsumi, you know how he is, he'd insist that we both share him, however I won't lose to you. Shoka nodded with a small smirk as they both went in different directions since the turn to their houses had just appeared. They continued to walk in the direction they needed to while both thinking the same thing. Katsumi/Shoka, I wonder how he is doing right now? Over at Beerus's planet. Well, it was actually Vegeta's now. Vegeta was currently doing sit-ups at a tremendous rate. He had actually reached the trillions and was moving at a rate of which no one could see. All that was in his place would be after images. Meanwhile, Izuku had a small pebble in his hand as he was concentrating extremely hard while his arm tensed and built up energy. Currently he was trying to use destruction. He still hadn't left since Vegeta's intense explanation. Of course Izuku didn't mind though. If he could, then he'd train every second of every day. Izuku, he shouted out as the pebble exploded as Vegeta grumbled. He knew he had to have taught Izuku ki before this, but for the past hour he had made the same mistake. Vegeta just wished that ki wasn't necessary to do this so it wouldn't drag on as long. For once, Vegeta decided to comment on it. Vegeta, all you did was break it with a regular ki blast. This caught Izuku off guard as he assumed that was all it was. A big flashy ki blast. He looked at the shattered bits of the pebble and saw that none of it was actually destroyed, just shattered. Seeing his confused look, Vegeta opted to keep his explanation going. Vegeta, when we gods use our destruction move, the target is completely erased from existence. He said as he started to spin a small rock on his index finger that akin to a basketball player when they try to show off. There was multiple questions on the currently shirtless Izuku's mind. Izuku, wait. Then how come I'm still here after you used destruction energy on me? Vegeta put his free hand to use by face palming himself, looking away and tooting in clear annoyance. Vegeta, because I destroyed your shirt and not your skin, you idiot. We turned something into nothing. And when matter is destroyed, it releases heaps of energy. As this came out of his mouth, his index finger glowed purple for a moment. Following this, the rock on his finger exploded. Following that, a much bigger explosion occurred due to the release of energy. This alone almost blew Izuku backwards and required him to dig his feet into the floor, that was just from a rock. Unlike the planet from before, there was no manually placed key barrier to stop him from flying off. Izuku's such force? A prideful yet signature smirk made its way onto Vegeta's face. Unlike Katsuki's, it didn't piss Izuku off. Vegeta, the explosion is the real highlight of using destruction. It never gets old. Now back to training. Izuku nodded as he then spent hours trying to do so. Each time it just came out as a ki blast. Again and again and again. He just seemed unable to do it. As he laid on the ground, face up, exhausted, he then turned to Vegeta, who was still doing those sit-ups. Izuku, Vegeta-sensei, do you ever envision anything when trying to use destruction? He asked in between heavy breaths of his. This question seemed to actually catch Vegeta off guard. Izuku's sensei did put genuine thought into this question, as it was possible it may help his student, but nothing seemed to come to mind. Vegeta, I don't know, it's been so long since my first time using destruction. I now just do it instinctively. You could say that my body is just constantly emitting it. Izuku sighed at this before Vegeta took notice of his downcast attitude, so he stood up and spoke. Vegeta, I can tell where you're going wrong though. While your explosions are bigger, all you are doing is putting your ki into the air around it to cause something flashy like you'd see on TV. In destruction, the extra explosion comes naturally without any effort. You aren't destroying it on an atomic level. Suddenly, Izuku's mind clicked as he picked up a very small pebble onto his finger. It was as if all the dots had connected, thus beginning another muttering spree. Izuku, that's it? I've been so focused about mimicking what I've seen on TV. Just trying to make it go kaboom, when instead I should have been trying to put my entire mind to wiping it out of existence. You never turn your destroyer mindset off, which is why you can always do it so theoretically dash. Vegeta smirked to himself as he watched Izuku continue to mutter. For once he didn't stop his student from muttering, as he was putting it to good use here. Vegeta, there we go. Izuku, if I was to only think about destroying this object and nothing else, the ki I produce should, in theory. The pebble on Izuku's finger then exploded, followed by a much bigger explosion, though only the size of a football due to the size of the pebble. A round of applause could be heard from Vegeta, which made Izuku turn around with a prideful smile of his own. Vegeta, there we go, took you long enough, brat. Since it didn't hurt him at all, Izuku's ego was filled even higher. He was ready to keep training and to hone his skill. Izuku, watch out Vegeta-sensei, I'll soon be destroying much larger things. In fact, I feel super pumped up. Face him dash. Before Izuku could even finish that sentence, Vegeta sped forwards and slugged him in the gut, making him topple over. The fact he was still conscious though was commendable, since most would just pass out. Vegeta, don't run before you can walk. That's it for today's training. I'll treat you to dinner and then I'll take you home. Understood? Izuku nodded as he slowly got up and followed Vegeta. He understood the reasoning of not overtraining, but sometimes it was a nice stress reliever for him. Izuku had just finished the meal that Vegeta had treated him to. They raided the fridge at the time chamber and ended up eating in a comfortable silence to restore Izuku's strength. Currently Izuku was walking home. Vegeta had gone back to his planet and was awaiting for the next training session. As Izuku started to approach his house, He heard some shouting from Izumi and Katsuki. Izumi/Katsuki, what? This caught Izuku off guard as he had never heard Izumi shout before. With Katsuki he always did, but not in genuine shock. Out of curiosity he snuck up to the house and gently peeked through the window. He put all of his energy/ki into his ears in an attempt to enhance it. Luckily it seemed to work. This in itself gave him multiple ideas for the future, but now was not the time. Toshinori, I understand your shock, but your mom will confirm this for you, Izumi. I am All Might and I believe one of you two are worthy to be my successor. My quirk is called One for All. It was passed on down to me like an Olympic torch. Each person cultivating it for the next until it got to me, and now it is my turn to give it to one of you. There was a silence that followed which was filled with thought. Soon a question came from Izumi. While it sounded nice, she said it in an incredibly condescending tone. Izumi. I'm not saying he deserves it, but why not Izuku since he's quirkless? Katsuki let out a laugh at the thought of Izuku even trying to handle any substantial power. He'd probably die trying. Katsuki, PFT, you know the answer already. It's because he's too effing weak. A nod was rewarded from Toshinori. He didn't laugh, but Izuku wasn't even a member of the family at this point. The entire family would just much rather he didn't exist, which is what they pretend had happened when it was just them four. Toshinori, precisely young Bakugou. As a quirkless, he is not fit to take this as he is a disgrace to the family. Now this may be difficult to choose, but which of you two want it? All of this was shocking to Izuku. He was even crying slightly due to the absolutely heartbreaking speaking from what used to be close people to him. As he was wiping his tears up, he heard Izumi speak instantly afterwards. Izumi, give it to Katsuki. This caused shock to the two in the room and the one listening in without permission. All of them were shocked she wasn't even putting up a fight. Katsuki, huh? I'd love to have it, but without even giving a fight, Izumi? Toshinori butted in as well, wanting to make sure both of them were 100% sure on their end decision. Toshinori, as young Bakugou said, are you sure? Izumi took a deep breath in and nodded. She let her quirk emit for a moment as some objects floated around the room. Izumi, I've seen your power up close and I don't think it would work well with my quirk, whereas it would work wonders with Katsuki and his immense battle prowess. She said as she gently held Katsuki's hand in her own. It showed their trust and care for each other which they had for basically no one else other than All Might. Toshinori, in that case young Bakugou, do you accept to be my successor? Katsuki gave the most prideful grin ever written, probably even surpassing Vegeta's as he spoke arrogantly, immediately accepting the offer. Katsuki, of course. Izuku had heard enough. He wouldn't be able to walk in without breaking down. He was upset, shirtless, and would likely get beaten by the two for training. He would have messaged Vegeta, but he had just left, so he didn't want to be a nuisance. Instead he opted to go to Takoba Municipal Beach, which has been collecting trash over the last several years. He could use this to train in order to distract himself. It's what he had been doing recently, but since he just developed his destruction technique, he could practice it to better it along with himself. Shoka and Katsumi had met up about an hour ago for a sleepover since it was going to be the weekend tomorrow. It was a shock that Shoka's father allowed it, but he knew the strength of this Katsumi and allowed her to go since it would be good training. As they were taking a detour to get some ice cream, they saw an explosion at the beach. It wasn't huge, but it was noticeable. It was also a different type of explosion than they had ever fought with warranted caution. Shoka, a villain? Katsumi thought about the chances of it being a villain. It seemed more likely to be someone homeless or someone training since it was the beach. Katsuki, even if it's not, we need to check it out. Shoka nodded in agreement as they ran over to where the explosion was. It took them a few minutes, but they soon arrived without being spotted. What they saw, however, wasn't what they expected. Instead of seeing a possible villain, they saw a shirtless Izuku. Seeing his abs for the first time made them both blush immensely as they watched from behind a corner while he held a handful of sand. It confused them quite a bit along with their flustered states, making them even more unable to think clearly. Katsumi, what's he doing? Shoka tried to find an answer, but none of this made sense to her, so she answered back in an honest way. Shoka, I do not know. They watched quietly as Izuku was incredibly focused. After a few moments of just standing there, he seemed to mutter to himself. Izuku, entirely on destruction. Wipe everything else from your mind. After saying this, there was a surprise to Shoka and Katsumi. There was an explosion of all the grains of sand in his hand, which then magnified and made a bigger explosion, making them gasp in pure shock and reveal their location from how loud their gasp was. Izuku then turned and his stutter came back from the surprise. Izuku, Shoka and Katsumi? What are you two doing here? He asked in surprise. Only now did the two notice that his eyes were red and puffy. He had clearly been crying. Something must have happened at home tonight and they were gonna find out what. Katsumi, was tonight a bad night? She asked curiously. She didn't plan to question what she saw with the explosion until she and Shoka knew Izuku was alright. In response to her question, Izuku slowly nodded, although he was pretty shaken up by something. Even if he didn't end up telling them, just getting him to calm down would be good enough in their books. Shoka, do you wish to stay the night with us? Izuku would have loved nothing more, but he would feel guilty for doing so. However, since they had known each other for so long, they would know if he was to lie in this state, so he decided to be honest. Izuku, I don't want to be a bother, but it would be nice. Since it was decided, both the girls walked over to him and gently held one hand each in a reassuring manner. Both of the females' hands were incredibly soft and soothed. Izuku actually didn't want to let go. This did take Izuku by surprise, but he gently held theirs back as they walked over to Katsumi's house, since Shoka's father never allowed anyone over for some odd reason. They soon arrived at Katsumi's house. Mistuki and Maresu seemed to be out of a date, so that left the three of them. They walked up to Katsumi's room as Izuku sat on her bed. In the meantime, Katsumi looked through her wardrobe to find some clothing for Izuku since he was shirtless. Upon finding nothing, she turned around to face Izuku. Katsumi, I'm sorry, none of my clothes will fit you and Katsuki would murder you if he found you wearing one of his shirts. Izuku waved it off and gave a soft laugh in confirmation to her statement. Izuku, it's fine really. They trio currently sat on Katsumi's bed now. There was a mattress on the floor and a slightly large single bed in the middle of the room. As the two females nodded in response, they looked at Izuku. He had scars plastered across his back, chest, and stomach. Some of these were burns, clearly from Katsuki. Shoka, are you sure all of these burns and bruises are okay to be left unbandaged? Looking down, Izuku traced his fingers over some of them and gave no response of pain to show they were fine. Izuku, yeah, I'm sure. They are pretty old at this point, but thanks for caring, he said with a bright smile that melted both their hearts. When a silence ensued, Izuku decided to bring up this topic while he was in control of his emotions. Izuku, oh right. You must be curious about what I was doing and how I did that, huh? To say the duo was extremely curious would be an understatement, so an immediate answer was given by the both of them. Shoka/Katsumi, yes we are, we both thought you were quirkless? Luckily Izuku had played out this scenario in his head many times. He had an exact speech which had zero chance of messing up, so with confidence he took a deep breath in and decided to perform that which he had practiced so much. Izuku, my quirk came extremely late, it's called destruction. I can use my energy to completely destroy anything I see fit, however I can only do really small objects currently. I can also use part of that energy to fire non-lethal energy blasts. It's super cool and I'll finally be able to become a hero with you too. I'm sorry for letting you two down for all this time. The apology wasn't rehearsed, it's what he truly though. Hearing his explanation and apology took Shoka and Katsumi by surprise. On one hand they were glad that their crush got a quirk, a pretty good one at that. However, the fact that he blames himself for all of that broke their hearts. While Katsumi thought about her words, Shoka just leant forwards and with her blunt nature kissed Izuku on the lips. Izuku blushed heavily at this, but yet, he didn't reject it, and while Katsumi said they could share, she was a bit upset that she couldn't take his first kiss. After about 10 seconds, Shoka moved away before speaking to him in her stoic yet calming voice. Shoka, does that help you understand that I do not care if you are quirkless or not? We were always going to be heroes together because you have the heart of one. This melted Izuku's heart this time, And he was going to respond had Katsumi not gotten herself together. Finally getting herself out of that feeling of shock, Katsumi went forwards and kissed Izuku as well. If Izuku wasn't embarrassed by the last kiss, he definitely was this time. The kiss was just as passionate as Shoka's, along with lasting for the same amount of time. They soon separated as Katsumi just spoke with a face-wide blush. Katsumi, we never gave a damn and it was never your fault. We've both loved you for over a decade now. Nothing will change that, so stop saying it's your fault. And that was it. Izuku was now crying tears of happiness. The duo let him have his tears since these were from a good cause this time. It lasted for many minutes and neither of the two rushed him at any point. This was the last time Izuku ever cried. He wiped his tears as he then hugged the both of them. Izuku, thank you. I promise I'll stop thinking that as long as you both stay by my side. Upon hearing this, both of them already knew their answer to his question. Shoka, of course we will, that kiss sealed the deal after all. Izuku. W8. You're okay with me dating both of you? Isn't it wrong? Katsumi, you idiot, we both know you can't pick between us, so we decided you can share. Needless to say, that night was filled with reassurance, happiness, and cuddles. No, they didn't Goddamn horny people in my story. But little did Izuku know that this one little change in his life and mindset was all he was missing from starting to master his training. Third-person POV. Over the next few months, Izuku's training results skyrocketed due to him finally needing what he was lacking. Confidence. Confidence in his abilities, confidence in his training, confidence in himself as a whole. Vegeta was surprised at first that the timid boy went from meek and small to a prideful man overnight and thus decided to up the training. Now 2 of the 3 training days a week were destruction and ki training. He wasn't improving massively within one day. However, within 5 months he had improved more than he had in the last 4 years, all due to this simple change of mindset. At the start he was still a bit nervous, but now he was quite a spitting image of Vegeta. He had confidence, destruction and pride at the forefront of his mind at most given opportunities. Of course, when he was relaxed, he switched off the destruction part, for example when he hangs out with his girlfriends. He almost never stuttered unless they made a surprising move on him or if they said something genuinely heartfelt, and within this 5 months, he had yet to cry once. He vowed to himself that his weakness wouldn't be shown again. He'd become an amazing hero without having others worry about him. Currently Izuku's location was on Vegeta's planet. They had just finished the day of battle theory and Izuku always took in something new. Izuku had some of his bottled water as he leant back on the floor, placing his hands behind him as he saw Vegeta approach. Vegeta? Izuku. Izuku turned his head to Vegeta and gave a soft yet arrogant smirk. It was a surprise that Vegeta used his first name for the first time, but he decided to reply with a snarky and sarcastic comment instead. He knew when he had to be serious and this wasn't one of those times. Izuku, what's with the first name? A destroyer shouldn't be so soft. Vegeta would have originally been shocked by comments like this. However, Izuku had gradually changed in the last 5 months and Vegeta had gotten used to that change. The biggest change was in month 1 where, as stated before, Izuku went from a nerd to a warrior. Vegeta, like you can talk with your girlfriends. But anyways, you've improved greatly as of late. That is why I will now be using your first name. It's a sign of respect. So you can also drop that sensei after my name. Upon hearing this, Izuku nodded and put his fist out to bump with Vegeta's. The fact that he had earned Vegeta's proper respect now was something he would forever treasure but never admit. Izuku, if you say so, Vegeta, said teacher, then met his fist bump, returning it with a smirk of his own. A nice silence came over the two of them as the wind gently blew both their hair. A few seconds later and they pulled away as Vegeta took a more teacher-like stern tone before speaking. Vegeta, there is 5 months left until the UA exam. After that I won't be able to help you anymore due to how strict your days will be and my duties as a destroyer that I have neglected. These next 5 months will be the worst yet and we will try to get your destruction, ki and battle prowess to a much higher level. Tuesday will no longer be a rest day. Understand? He phrased that like an offer, but Izuku knew it was a command. He didn't have any reason to deny it though. He wanted to surpass Katsuki and actually be on the level of Shoka and Katsumi. Hopefully this would help him do so. With Katsuki having All Might's quirk in his back pocket, he couldn't afford to slack now. Izuku, right? Currently Izuku was on his way to his girlfriend's house. This time it was specifically Katsumi's since Shoka's father didn't ever want any guests around for reasons unknown to Izuku. As he was walking, he made his way under a tunnel with his hands in the pockets. In the past, either Katsumi or Shoka would be walking home with him since it wasn't safe. However, now he was treated by them normally. It was never their fault. Just he was weak, but now he isn't. The thought of that improvement alone is enough to put a prideful grin on Izuku's face. This was cut off though by the sewer lid behind him flying off with a voice. It would surprise most, however, Izuku had felt his ki about a minute ago, so as this villain was quietly climbing out the sewer, Izuku turned to face him, making him tut. Sludge villain, all this effort just for you to turn around? Such a pain. Doesn't matter though, a medium-sized meat shield will only take me 45 seconds. Izuku just nodded and pulled his hands out his pockets before stretching. The pride coming off of him was unreal as he decided to be arrogant towards this villain. Izuku, that's cool and all, but what makes you think you can actually pull it off? He antagonized with that prideful grin still on his face as he jumped into his fighting stance. Izuku hadn't learnt this stance from Vegeta, however he had just unconsciously taken it for himself. The arrogant comments seemed to annoy the villain to no ends. Without wasting any more time, the sludge villain charged at Izuku. However, for Izuku, time slowed down as he pictures the situation. Izuku, take a breath, like Vegeta said, and analyze the situation. He's made of sludge, so unless I was to put all my ki into my fist, it would do nothing. I definitely can't use destruction on him since his body is weird. I may risk ending him and ruining the fight, so ki it is. Time then sped up again as Izuku dodged the villain's first attempt at grabbing him. He countered by having a blue ki blast charge in his palm before throwing it at the villain. This villain just barely dodged, but it completely disintegrated some of the sludge. Seeing this as the best Izuku had to offer, the villain didn't feel threatened and instead started to rush towards Izuku again. A barrage of blows started to be hurled at Izuku, and said student knew that if even a single one hit him, he'd be bound and be in trouble. They seemed to be evenly matched. While the slime villain held more power overall, Izuku's years of experience along with battle theory slowly started to give him the edge. The villain backed off for a moment as he panted, regrowing some of his sludge. Sludge villain, with that quirk, it's not smart for me to fight you here, so I'll just run awa dash. Before he could finish that sentence, he was cut off by a sight to behold. All Might, I am here. All Might burst through the sewer system before the villain could do anything and used the wind pressure from a punch to completely destroy the villain, rapidly collecting him in a bottle before facing the victim. Was that Izuku? Since when did his clothes cling too tight to him? His muscular figure. Wait, when did he get a muscular figure? All Might gasped for a moment before regaining his composure and speaking. All Might, you did well to hold out against a villain like that, young one. Unlike literally everyone, Izuku didn't seem to be even the slightest bit excited to see All Might. In fact, was that annoyance on his face? It was even more evident as Izuku spoke in an annoyed tone. He wanted to finish that battle. Izuku, I was about to defeat him until you came along. This cold attitude towards All Might from anyone besides Endeavor was unheard of. However, he just laughed before shaking his head. All Might, you mustn't use your quirk against others, even in self-defense. All Might knew he didn't have a quirk, however he was under the illusion that Izuku thought he and Toshinori were different people. Of course this wasn't true. Izuku, whatever, and if I was bloodily mutilated? What then, Toshinori? Now if you excuse me, I have a date to catch. He coldly said as he walked away, leaving All Might / Toshinori in shock about many things. However, he decided to question them later since he needed to take the sludge villain to the station. All Might, wait, where is the sludge villain? Unknown to All Might, Izuku had used the smallest of ki blasts on the cap of the bottle so the villain could get away. Izuku was going to fight the villain and Izuku was gonna win. He even had this planned out now, tracking the villain's key as he walked after him while messaging Katsumi that he'd be a bit late due to a villain and All Might. When Izuku turned around the corner onto a street, he found exactly what he was expecting. The sludge villain was there, however the road was laced in fire. He actually had Katsuki captured. Now this wasn't because Katsuki was weak, he was simply caught off guard and his struggling was causing all this. Izuku, what a twist, I get my fight, I can use my destruction on a person and I can piss off Katsuki? Bargain. He said to himself as he slowly walked through the crowd, none of the heroes doing anything. As much as Izuku didn't want to use his destruction, if he didn't instantly end the fight then he may run the risk of injuring others. He didn't care how much he hurt himself trying to do this. Izuku then got to the front of the crowd before groaning in a nuance. Izuku, a hero acts not watches? Death Arms turned around to see who said that, however he was instead greeted by a muscular teen running at surprising speeds towards the villain. Quickly finding the right words, Death Arms then reached out towards him but found himself a bit short as he shouted out. Death Arms, stop. Another hero on the scene saw the situation in front of them, surprise taking over as he spoke. Kamui, is he suicidal? Finally, Katsuki looked up and saw Izuku charging at them both. He took notice of Izuku's increased speed as he growled. Katsuki, FNG Deku? When did he get so fast? The sludge villain saw Izuku and swung one of its elongated arms at him, who in turn jumped and flipped over it before landing perfectly and continuing to run towards said villain. Izuku held a look that said, if I get to you, you're effing dead, and it actually intimidated the villain. In Izuku's right hand, a dark purple glow was starting to form. Every attack the villain threw at Izuku was either deflected or dodged in an extremely smooth manner. This went until Izuku jumped about 6 feet into the air and put his right arm out, his left grabbing his right arm's wrist. Izuku, Hakai. This was Izuku's first time using this on a person, however he made sure to target the sludge villain and not Bakugou. As the sludge villain shouted in pain, he rapidly disintegrated as Izuku put Bakugou's arm over his shoulder before running over to Death Arms. Izuku, this effer only has a few bruises on him, don't worry. The language surprised everyone. However, Izuku had quickly ran round the corner and was walking over to Katsumi's house, leaving Katsuki, the heroes and All Might in shock at what his son just did. Izuku stood in front of Katsumi's door and nodded. It instantly flew open as both Katsumi and Shoka hugged him to the floor. Izuku, Katsumi? Shoka? What's wrong? He asked, not that he didn't mind being smothered slightly by the gifted teens, however he did want an answer, he also didn't expect Shoka to be here. Katsumi, we effing saw you fight that sludge villain on TV. I had to call Shoka over because she didn't believe we were actually sane. Shoka, we know you're strong now, but be careful. We worry. She admitted as Izuku sighed and smirked before nodding and standing up. Izuku, fine, I'll be more careful. So what's the plan for today? The next 5 months were hell for Izuku. Vegeta wasn't FNG messing around when he said he had plans to step up the training. Izuku was basically a walking bag of muscle with no soul inside of it. However, today was the day. The UA exam, and no matter if he got in or not, he only had 2 weeks of training with Vegeta left before he couldn't train with him anymore. Currently, Izuku was walking to UA while remembering the conversation he and Vegeta had. Vegeta, so today's the day, huh, Izuku? Izuku, yep. I'm so excited. Vegeta, good, you've improved and you'll be able to pass no problem. Now show the world the power of destruction. Izuku smirked to himself. He was walking with Shoka and Katsumi and currently they had just arrived through the gate. Shoka was holding Izuku's right hand while Katsumi was showing off what was hers by clinging to Izuku's left arm, having it between her beasts while being held. Beforehand it would have completely broke Izuku, but now he openly accepted it. Shoka, aren't you being a bit too shameless, Katsumi? Katsumi, of F in course not. I'm showing the world that this hunk right here is mine. Ain't that right, Izu? Izuku, of course, Katsumi, though I feel like you belong to me and not the other way round. Katsumi, oh yeah? Wanna test that? Although they were lovers, Katsumi and Izuku were heavily competitive with each other, more in a friendly way than anything though. Shoka, Izu already owns me. And Shoka was also a rival, but she was blunt with these things in the relationship. There was so many people here that caught Izuku's eyes. There was a purple-haired girl with odd earplugs, there was someone with pink skin, someone with long black hair. Everyone actually had personality here, unlike the extras. Katsuki, effin' move Deku before I crush your skull in. Katsuki said from behind Izuku as the trio turned around to see Katsuki and his girlfriend Izumi. Katsuki walked while Izumi floated to match his height. Izumi, have some pride, Katsumi, everyone's gonna think you're a whore. Tension started building as everyone around them was listening in. However, instead of Katsumi getting angry, it was Izuku who walked forwards to meet Izumi's gaze. Izuku, if you call her a whore ever again, there will be no saving you. Katsuki, what? Like you and FNG hiding your quirk. Grow over yourself, you're not that impressive. Izuku, want to test that? Before it could go any further, the bell rang saying it was time to everyone to gather in the auditorium. Third-person POV. The day after the sludge villain incident. Currently Izuku was sleeping in Katsumi's house. He shared the bed with Katsumi and Shoka, who called her dad saying she was training with the strong explosive girl, and was in the middle of the two. Even though this story is about our green-haired male, Shoka woke up first. She was on the right side of Izuku and felt his right arm throbbing and pulsating every few seconds. The veins pushed out against the skin quite heavily, and oddly enough they seemed to be a dark shade of purple all the way to his elbow. At that point they slowly turned into a lighter shade of purple before being their normal color at his shoulder. She gasped in surprise, the stoic and monotone girl who rarely showed emotion. She gasped in surprise at this. Curiously, she poked the artery at his wrist, but the moment she did, all she heard was a scream of pain from Izuku while he rapidly sat up. This of course woke Katsumi up in the process. Katsumi, the FIS happening? Shoka knew Katsumi sometimes got erratic when threatened, so she wasted no time getting to the point. Shoka, check Izu's right arm. Specifically the forearm. Hearing her second most favorite voice, behind Izuku of course, she nodded while Izuku also looked, both of them in complete shock as Izuku spoke. Izuku, how the hell did this happen? While the two of them wondered, Shoka had a light bulb go off in her head as she spoke. Shoka, since you got your quirk late, perhaps it is a backlash of a move so powerful? Before Izuku could reply, he put his left hand to his forehead and instantly pulled it away. He was burning up extremely hard. Needing an answer from Vegeta, he needed to get Katsumi and Shoka away from him for a moment. Izuku, sorry about this. But could you two go shopping for some medicine please? I'll pay you back. Katsumi just laughed as Shoka remained neutral. Katsumi, no sweat, however we both know you don't earn money. No need to pay us back anyways. Shoka, we know you do the same for us. They said before leaving, letting out a sigh of relief. Izuku pulled out his phone with his left hand and messaged Vegeta the word emergency. The moment he did, Vegeta appeared in front of Izuku and sighed, seeing the state of him and his arm. Vegeta, I thought I told you not to use Hakai until at least we finished your training. You are not a god of destruction and you only unlocked destruction 5 months ago. Izuku, oh, is that what it is then? Vegeta crouched down and took a close look at Izuku's arm before speaking. Vegeta, basically, it's a mix of a few main things. The first is that you outputted so much more ki and energy than you normally do that you seem to actually shatter the bones in your arm. However, I imagine in the mix of your adrenaline and happiness of seeing your women that you didn't notice. The next thing is that this is a godly technique. Without god ki it is a flawed move, taking a long time to do so, which leads to reason 3. You outputted destruction in your right hand, but also held your wrist hard and put all the destruction energy from your left hand into your wrist, which has in turn started to destroy your blood cells and even some of your arteries. Be glad that you have higher pain endurance, or you would still be screaming. Izuku clenched his left fist hard enough to pierce his skin. Many thoughts on his mind, but he said the main one. Izuku, but I still need to train. And this is at least going to take 7 months to heal. I'm gonna miss the exam and the rest of your training. Vegeta, don't hold back, Inesh. Vegeta, you idiot. You can't train when your body isn't in good condition, it will just have the opposite effect. Be glad we still have one more Senzu in existence. After this though we are out, no more. So you need to hold off on the Hakai unless it is either life or death, or, actually that's it. It is your final trump card, understand? Izuku nodded slowly as he was handed the Senzabine. He sighed as he ate it, which therefore healed his arm, blood and his fever. Izuku, I owe you one. Vegeta, you owe me more than one. I knew it would be bad, but I didn't expect that bad. Maybe, listen up Izuku, we are doing no more battle training. Izuku shot up out the bed and glared at Vegeta. Izuku, but how am I gonna get stronger? Vegeta, let me finish, I mean battle technique and skill. I've taught you everything I know over the last 11 years about hand-to-hand combat. Every training day from now on will be about ki and destruction. Hearing the full explanation, Izuku seemed happy with his and nodded in contempt before hearing the front door open. Izuku, thank you Vegeta. I'll see you for training tomorrow. His teacher simply nodded and teleported literally with a second to spare because the door then flew open. Katsumi, did your arm heal already? Izuku, yeah, basically I destroyed the corrupted blood cells and gave it a few minutes for fresh ones to form. That's all it was, but at least we have these as spares now. They both nodded, a bit unsure but glad he was alright. Present day. After finishing the written exam, our main trio were walking to the hall where everything would be explained about the practical. Shoka was clinging onto his right arm and unintentionally putting it between her boobs like Katsumi had earlier, as she spoke. Shoka, I know it was 5 months ago, but you seemed really in pain when I touched your arm. Are you sure it's fine for this exam? Izuku, of course, I just won't use that move unless I have zero choice. Katsumi, you FNG better. It was super serious you. Izuku just laughed at this as they sat down in their seats. Shoka was just gently stroking her thumb over the veins and arteries on his hand and wrist as Present Mike appeared. Present Mike, for all you examinees listening in, welcome to my show today. Everybody say hey. Izuku debated saying it just to make the banana man feel better, however he didn't. The silence loomed over the entire room, which almost made Katsumi burst out in laughter while Shoka kept doing her thing. Feeling sorry for him, Izuku decided he'd join in if he asked again. Present Mike, what a refined response. Then I'll quickly present to you the rundown of the practical exam. Are you ready? Yeah. Sighing to himself, Izuku pumped his left fist into the air and roared out a response by projecting his ki into his voice. Izuku, yeah. Present Mike had a sheet-eating grin at this, giving a soft thumbs up to Izuku. Katsumi started laughing her ass off shamelessly. Katsuki was super FNG annoyed along with Izumi and Shoka, while she was just tracing her thumb over Izuku's veins on his right arm. Present Mike, as it says in the application requirements, you listeners will be conducting 10-minute mock urban battles after this. You can bring whatever you want with you. After the presentation, you'll head to the specified battle center, okay? Our main trio looked at their own cards, seeing they were all in different battle areas as to prove he was right. Present Mike, 3 different types of faux villains are stationed in each battle center. You earn points for each of them based on their level of difficulty. Your goal, dear listeners, is to use your quirks to earn points by destroying or immobilizing the faux villains. Of course, attacking other examinees and any other unheroic actions are prohibited. When he finished that, a blue-haired student stood up with his arm in the air. May I ask a question? Present Mike, okay. A light then cast upon this boy as he spoke. On the printout there are 4 types of villains. If that is a misprint, then UA, the most prominent school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. We examinees are here in this place because we wish to be molded into exemplary heroes. He then turned around and pointed at both Shoka, Katsumi and then Izuku. In addition, you lot over dash. Izuku sighed as he stood up, giving an unforgiving death glare at this male which made him shiver down to his core. Izuku, just shut up, if you don't then that stick up your ass will end up coming out your effin' mouth. I'm sure Present Mike was about to explain, so sit down. Feeling intimidated, Ida sat down as Katsumi gave a smirk of pride. Present Mike, okay, examinee number 7111. Thanks for the great message. The 4th type of villain is worth 0 points. That guy's an obstacle, so to speak. There's one in every battle center. An obstacle that will go crazy in narrow spaces. It's not impossible to defeat, but there's no reason to defeat it either. I recommend that you listeners try to avoid it. That's all from me. Finally, I'll give you listeners a present, our school motto. The hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "A true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Go beyond. Plus ultra." Now, everyone, good luck suffering. Everyone then stood up and walked off to their own battle centers after getting changed into whatever they'd rather. With Vegeta just before the exam. Vegeta looked over to Izuku, who was doing some sit-ups. Out of nowhere he threw a capsule to Izuku, who barely caught it. Izuku, huh? What's this, Vegeta? Vegeta, while it may not be your permanent hero costume, you should at least wear it for the exam. When you press the button on the top, it'll release my battle armor for you to wear. With Izuku in the changing room. He looked at the capsule and took a deep breath in before pressing the button at the top. It then gave off a small explosion as some clothes were in Izuku's hands. It seemed to be the armor Vegeta used to wear before he opted for the God of Destruction clothing. Izuku gave a soft smirk at this as he put it on. Over at Battle Center B. Izuku currently stood in front of a huge door with a wild amount of other people. He was confident in his abilities as he thought to himself. Izuku, so this is it, huh? About to see whether my 11 years of training with Vegeta paid off or not. He looked up to the center of the door with a smirk as it opened. Present Mike. G. Everyone stood around confused as Izuku just dashed in, thinking two things to himself. Izuku, time to make you proud, Vegeta, and you Katsuki, time to even obliterate your first place with my own. Third-person POV. As Izuku dashed in at not unreasonable speeds, everyone still found it impressive. Yet they were curious about why he was running inside until Present Mick's voice interrupted them. Present Mike, what's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights. Run, run. The green-haired kid gets it. The die has been cast, you know. Everyone else started to run after Izuku, who was a good 100 meters away into the city. He was wondering what the best method would be. Whether he attempted to use destruction, ki, or combat. Izuku, let's think. I don't know how big they are, so I may not be able to use destruction. They may be stronger than what I'm able to put out in combat. I'll try combat and see where that gets me. He exclaimed to himself as he saw a one-pointer burst through the wall. This confirmed his theory about destruction, as this one was bigger than he himself. He's the same height as Canon because you can't go to the gym and get taller. Robot. Target acquired, I'll end you. It rushed forwards at Izuku, of which he found impressive, for a bunch of metal anyways. Izuku put his hands out and started to fire ki blasts from it at the robot. One hit it, causing it to explode in a dramatic fashion with a decent-sized explosion. A smirk was plastered onto Izuku's face as he saw the carnage he could cause with no backlash. Izuku then started to run forwards at a speed quicker than before, putting his ki into his legs. As he ran, a huge metal arm was swung at him, which he barely dodged in time. When he turned to look, there was a 3-pointer surrounded by 4 2-pointers. Izuku, an ambush, huh? Did you really need to plan everything, UA? I doubt most the people here will even be worthy of joining the school, let alone surviving an ambush. He shouted out with a prideful grin on his face. A flash of purple fire was seen around him, but it went just as quickly as it came. Didn't even see it himself. One of the 2-pointers rushed over to him and tried to slug him with a right hook. However, Izuku smirked and put out one hand. The moment it connected with Izuku's, said teen let out a single word. Izuku, Hakai. The 2-pointer's arm disappeared into nothing, causing it to malfunction and blow up from the antimatter following it afterwards. Izuku then turned to the robots as he sent a glare at them. Since they were full robots, they couldn't feel fear. However, almost any person would have felt that in this moment. Izuku, since you can speak, I wonder if you can feel, maybe even fear. Terror? Let's see as I obliterate you 1 by 1 inch. A sadistic tone of voice for someone so young, yet he wasted no time and started to rush forwards. As if they were bodyguards, the 2-pointers stood in front of the 3-pointer and all charger at Izuku at once. Izuku, at least you have common sense, it'll make this more entertaining. He commented in a snarky tone of voice before jumping onto one of the robot's arms after they tried to punch him. Instead they hit the floor and cracked it slightly. Izuku, it may actually hurt if you hit me and I'm not ready for it. He then jumped up to the air before swinging his right arm across his body, having a volley of ki blasts rain down on the 2 pointers, ultimately ending them all. Izuku then jumped down onto the floor and took a look at the 3-pointer. He started stretching to limber himself up since he had an outrageous task planned. Izuku, I want to destroy it with my fists, he said to no one in particular as he and the 3-pointer charged at each other at the same time, the 3-pointer firing a blow first which Izuku flipped over. Using this time to get a blow on it, Izuku fired a punch at the robot's face, making it dent a little and had it be sent back a few feet. At the viewing center, the teachers were currently watching the students do their exam. It was still near the start, but they already knew who to watch. There was the explosive siblings, the telekinetic daughter of Green Esper, the daughter of Endeavor, and there was a kid that only All Might and Inko knew about since they never let it out that they had a quirkless son. Half of the reason was due to them forgetting about him, but the other half was that they didn't want their reputation tarnished. I want those 5 in my class, specifically the green-haired boy. This was said by a scruffy-looking man with long black hair and stubble around his cheeks. The creature looked at him and spoke. I was just thinking the same thing, but it's a curious thing. This boy demonstrated what his quirk was, and yet he has enough strength to dent and push back a 3-pointer. To have just his natural strength like that means he must have trained himself well? Something caught its attention as it pulled out Izuku's form and read it out. Izuku Vegeta, age 15, quirk is called Destruction. It seems he can vaporize anything he chooses and maybe a lighter version of that as we have seen. All Might then stepped up, seeing his son's potential he now decided to claim him as his own. All Might, that is my son. You have a son? Back with Izuku. He had destroyed the 3-pointer along with a few other robots. He was counting his score in his mind and he currently sat at 50. He seemed to be the highest scorer in his area, but the mere thought of Katsuki doing better than him made him want to obliterate the entire battlefield. So he kept going and showing his power off more and more. That is until the ground started to shake. A massive robot taller than all the buildings there showed itself as everyone started to run. Instead, Izuku just smirked to himself at the thing in front of him. Izuku, as excessive as this is, it's certainly making my blood go wild. Who cares if it's 0 points, everyone here is just dash. Help! Izuku turned to face where the voice came from, and it seemed to be a brunette threatening to be crushed under the 0-pointer. Izuku, everyone is just a coward and fake? While Izuku couldn't wait to fight it, he was a hero first and foremost for those who have done nothing wrong to him. He charged his arm backwards before throwing it forwards with a green inerny blast at the 0-pointer's chest. Izuku, final shine attack. While it didn't destroy the robot, it seemed to push it back by about 200 meters. This would give Izuku the time he needed to rush in and grab the girl. Izuku, can you walk? Uraraka, Ochiko Uraraka, and I think my legs are broken, she said in between sniffles and threats of crying. Izuku sighed as he pulled her up bridal style. Izuku, are your arms fine? She looked confused at this along with blushing heavily. Uraraka, they should be fine, why? Izuku, hold on to me, like someone's giving you a piggyback? He explained as he moved her to his back. Immediately she wrapped her arms around him and became a human backpack. Izuku, also because the 0-pointer is still alive, he said, pointing to the towering creature now only 100 meters away. It had a massive indent in its chest, but it was still running. Uraraka, it's still standing after that? We have TT to run. Izuku shook his head as he put both his hands out, putting the bottom parts of his hands together. His body started to bulk up in size from the amount of energy he was building up. It was starting to generate a large gust of wind, in fact, which was threatening to blow everyone away who was close by. Izuku, hold on tight, Uraraka. She nodded as her grip tightened. More and more energy built up as the robot got closer. Izuku, not yet. It started to cock back its fist ready to slam it down on Izuku, however he was planning to spend every single second charging up his attack. This went until its fist was about to slam down on Uraraka and Izuku. However, at the last moment Izuku shouted something out. Izuku, final flash. A huge beam unlike anything Uraraka had seen before went off. It was so big in fact and used up so much energy that it ended all the cameras nearby. The robot's fist collided with the blast as they seemed at a stalemate. Neither one pushed the other back as Izuku gritted his teeth. Izuku, more. He roared out in a deep and booming voice, enough to scare Uraraka for a second as the blast grew in size, pushing back the robot's fist before blowing a hole through its chest. The blast kept on going into the sky as it was visible by everyone, yet no one knew what caused it except for Izuku's two girlfriends. With Katsuki. Katsuki had just broken his arm firing a 100% OFA explosion at the zero-pointer. He actually put a bunch of people at risk with this. But it did end the zero-pointer. As he gasped in pain, he looked to the sky to see a huge energy beam going up into space. Katsuki, what the FF is that? He yelled, still in pain before passing out with a smirk on his face. He knew he had passed without any question. With Izuku. Izuku panted hard as he looked to Uraraka and gave her a thumbs up. Izuku, looks like I kept you safe? He said before falling forwards and passing out. Uraraka gasped as she turned Izuku over to his front. Present Mike, and that's time. Uraraka didn't care, she had to make sure Izuku was alright. She put the back of her hand to his forehead and felt him burning up. It wasn't as bad as when he used Hakai, but it just seemed like he had pushed himself over the limit. Soon after, Recovery Girl walked in as. She looked at the two. Recovery Girl, oh dear me, your legs seem to broken lass, should I heal you? While it hurt for sure, she shook her head and turned to Izuku. Uraraka, heal him first please. He saved my life and I wasted so much of his exam time, so at the very least make sure he is okay first. Recovery Girl smiled at this, planning to give her some rescue points later on before she put her lips out and kissed Izuku. Upon nothing happening, Uraraka looked worried. Recovery Girl, don't worry, he's not injured at all. But he's out of stamina is all. If I was to heal him then he'd die, but there's nothing for me to heal anyways. He'll wake up in a few hours but I'll take him to my ward just in case. You however do need healing. Uraraka nodded in understanding as she allowed herself to be kissed by Recovery Girl before watching Izuku be put on a stretcher and taken off. In the viewing area. Nizu, so he ran away for an unknown reason and you haven't seen him in years? You're convinced he is your son? All Might, positive? Nizu knew All Might was lying, he didn't have a high intelligence quirk for nothing. Before he could say anything else his phone went off. Nizu, yes? This is Nizu speaking. How awful, oh, how wonderful. I'll be there momentarily, I can push my paperwork back a few hours. Thank you. He then put his phone away before looking at All Might. Nizu, I'll chase this up for you when I have free time Toshinori. I need to make 100% sure with a DNA test and all the sorts, so give me a few days. All Might, right sir? Thank you for hearing me out. In the hospital ward a few hours later. Izuku woke up in a hospital bed, luckily he still had Vegeta's clothes on. However he wasn't expecting some rat-bear hybrid to be sat on top of him. Izuku, what are you? He bluntly asked as Nizu just laughed. Nizu, you definitely do not pull any punches, do you Vegeta? Izuku looked confused for a moment before realizing he registered that as his last name. Izuku, nope. So what did you want with me? I doubt I was passed out so long I missed the exam results. Nizu, no you did not, you have only been passed out for 2 hours. I just have a bit of questioning for you. This is optional but due to the fact that Toshinori was lying it may be more than ideal for you to tell me the truth. The moment his father's name was mentioned, Izuku put his hands in a fist which Nizu most definitely didn't miss. Izuku, fire away. Nizu smiled hearing this as he didn't waste any time. Nizu, are you related to Toshinori Yagi in the slightest? Izuku, yes, I'm his biological son. Nizu, why specify biological? And why not use the name of Yagi? Izuku gritted his teeth at this as he sat up. Izuku, because Ace a sheet father and Inko is a sheet mother. They aren't family to me. Neither is my poor excuse for a sister. Nizu was definitely taken aback by how loud Izuku was, however this gave him a lot of needed insight. Nizu, I take it you don't have a good relationship with them? Due to this now being a safeguarding issue, would you feel free to explain the whole story to me? I don't think All Might was telling the truth. Izuku nodded and began to explain the entire thing. Him being born quirkless, being betrayed by two of his best friends, how his parents turned on him, neglected him and abused him for a solid 10 years. He left out Vegeta and said that his quirk developed late. Nizu. This leaves us in a tricky situation. You definitely cannot stay with them, however we can't arrest two of our top heroes as much as we may want to. Izuku, it's bullshit, but I refuse to live with them anyways. Nizu, that's a good first start, however you can't be homeless either. Luckily, one of our teachers has taken an interest in you. Would you care to give them a test run? Izuku. No, I don't want to. This seemed to shock Nizu by quite a bit, though he didn't seem annoyed or distasteful. Instead he seemed more curious than ever at what possibility Izuku could be thinking of. Izuku, don't get me wrong, I am leaving. I just am going to get my own place. I have a few contacts. Izuku of course was referring to Vegeta, however no one else would ever know of the existence of the god of destruction. Nizu, if you truly believe you can, then you may be free to do so. Looking at your points alone though I'm confident in saying you'll be getting in. If it all goes horribly we can offer you a residence of stay in UA. A small smirk along with a nod was given by Izuku as he stood up making the chimera get off him. Nizu, off already? Surely you aren't healed yet? Izuku, not at all, just I want to get this done as soon as possible. He said before leaving, going to get his stuff from his home for the last time, yet he knew that they would now care for him due to him having power. Third-person POV. Izuku was currently walking out of UA. Since it was late he didn't see Shoka or Katsumi. Instead he looked at his phone to see about 57 missed messages, most of which from Katsumi saying she's gonna wreck him when she gets her hands on him. This made him sweat drop a small bit along with allowing himself to smile slightly. The first few messages were simply that huge-ass beam was you, wasn't it? However he hadn't replied to that due to passing out, so instead she started sending threats, telling him that he better be okay or she'll kick his ass. He gasped as he realized he hadn't told Vegeta the situation yet. A simply push of an empty message button was enough for Izuku to see Vegeta for about half a second before teleporting to his planet. Vegeta, of course you had to spend yourself by destroying that zero-pointer. Izuku chuckled lightly as he looked at his open palm, closing it before looking at Vegeta. Izuku, I plan to confront my family one last time before taking my stuff and leaving. I'm ashamed to ask but dash. Vegeta cut him short and threw over a key to Izuku who just had a perplexed face. Vegeta, my place on Earth, an abandoned building called Capsule Corporation. If you use that key then you'll be given access to everything? If this was the old Izuku he would have cried. However he had changed, instead he just smirked and nodded. Vegeta, by the way, your father is the top hero, right? Izuku looked at him as if he was an idiot before simply nodding. Vegeta then sighed as he walked in front of Izuku and spoke. Vegeta, if he happens to try to keep you by force then what is your plan? Hakai. Before Izuku got another word out, Vegeta chopped his shoulder which sent him into the floor and even cracking it a little. Vegeta, if you're down after that then how are you going to Hakai him before he downs you? Izuku stayed face down on the floor while he thought for a moment. Soon however he began to stand back up and looked Vegeta in the eyes. Izuku, I'm going to need to spend a day or so here. It was night the next day and Izuku was currently stood in front of the house's door with Shoka and Katsumi. He reached towards the door handle and his hand was shaking. Katsumi, you took down a zero-pointer and you're really sheeting yourself over this? While it seemed mean-spirited, it was her way of trying to give Izuku confidence. Meanwhile Shoka gave a more direct approach. She held his hand to make it stop shaking before speaking. Shoka, we'll be here as well. However you have to go in there on your own, it's not our place to do anything. He took in a deep breath before looking at them and nodding. Instead of knocking on the door, he instead boot-kicked it down. The first to check the commotion was Izumi. Her hair was floating upwards slightly due to her quirk, However, it turned off when she saw Izuku. Izu? She said. This disgusted Izuku as he just started to walk past her as if she didn't exist. Just as he was about to go up the stairs, she put a hand on his shoulder before speaking. Izumi, brother? Don't you want dinner? Izuku simply didn't speak as he swiped her hand off of him before going to his room. Izumi used this time to go to the kitchen and speak to Inko and All Might. Izumi, Mom. Dad. Izuku's here and he's just ignoring me. Toshinori, he is? They immediately dashed to the hallway to see Izuku carrying a box of his stuff about to leave. Toshinori, Izuku. Stop, why are you ignoring us? He didn't speak yet again and started to open the door, however Izumi activated her quirk to keep him in place. Sighing, Izuku finally spoke. Izuku, so you can ignore me for a decade except for abuse, but when I do it for a few minutes it's not allowed? Seriously, grow the F up? Izumi grew angry at this as she started to put more pressure on him. His knees were bending as he was clutching his teeth together. Inko, Izumi, you'll end him. Toshinori, that was no way to talk to us, son. Now put your stuff back and have dinner with us. Surprising everyone, Izuku managed to lift one of his hands slowly but surely before putting 2 fingers on his forehead. Izuku, see ya, Yagi, he said before he simply vanished along with his stuff. Izumi slammed the door open to see Shoka and Katsumi there as she immediately played the blame game. Izumi, what did you two do? Shoka, so he took that route? Guess you tried force then? Katsumi, shoulda if and known. Anyways, we don't know, he just said he had a plan. I'm going home anyways. A few seconds before what happened, Vegeta was stood at the entrance of Capsule Corp out of nowhere. Izuku teleported in front of him with his stuff, though he was panting. Izuku, man, that takes a lot out of ya. Vegeta, no, you just had to rush, the learning was all. You'll be able to rest today anyways. You get your results in 13 days, so that means you have 12 more days of training with me since you're resting today. Then we part ways. Oh right, Izuku forgot about that, but he didn't let it get him down. Instead he saw this as the next hardest 2 weeks of his life. Izuku, right? I'll see you tomorrow. Vegeta just smirked and teleported away as Izuku then unlocked the door before walking inside. The lights turned on and it was simply huge. The first room seemed to be a receptionist area, but since no one was here it simply could be used for whatever he so decided. Past that was a garden with several animals, most of which seemed really young. There were mainly birds, dogs and cats here. The second floor seemed to house the supplies like the kitchen, the bathroom and all of that. Finally there was a third floor with all the king-size bedrooms. With this, though, there was also a basement with a sparing chamber and a gravity chamber which made Izuku smirk. However, he would spend today resting, he promised himself. It was the last day of training. Izuku's results were supposed to come today. He had an alarm that went to his phone when mail arrived, so he was currently training with Vegeta in his base form. They were doing basic training, how to react, counter, defend, all of that. Eventually Izuku actually surprised Vegeta and managed to punch him in the nose, sending him back half a meter. Vegeta, how you've grown. We'll call it to dash. Izuku, there's one more thing. Vegeta, you've never even come close to your full power. You've only used destruction once. I know I won't win, but I want to see how I compare to your full strength since this is the last time we'll be training. He asked as Vegeta looked at him, a bit uncertain but eventually nodding. He planted his feet to the ground and pumped his arms to the side. Vegeta, Ga! Aura started to flying off of him, pushing Izuku back as he looked in shock. It was shaking all of Beerus's planet as the aura started to turn into purple flames. Izuku knew he was strong, but this was insane. He was actually kneeling from how much shock he was in. Izuku tried firing ki blasts at Vegeta's aura only for it to disintegrate the moment it made contact. The aura finally calmed down as Vegeta's hair was now purple, his eyebrows weren't there and he looked a lot more battle-ready now. Vegeta, I thought you wanted to test my power, yet you can't even stand? He shouted out in frustration as his aura flared even higher, more power coming off of him as Izuku was shaking. He loved a good fight, but Vegeta could end him quicker than he could blink. Vegeta, where's your pride? What have I taught you? He growled as he kicked Izuku, sending him flying into a boulder as Vegeta started to walk. However, Izuku started to slowly stand, glaring at Vegeta as he spoke. Izuku, no matter how strong the foe, I will get up again and again until I can't get up anymore, and then I'll get up again, he said as he finally stood. While he was uncontrollably shaking, he went into the battle stance Vegeta had told him and was ready to fight. Seeing this, Vegeta smirked and powered down before putting a hand on Izuku's shoulder and teleporting inside of Capsule Corp. Vegeta, good, I truly didn't waste my time on you. You'll be fine on your own now. Izuku looked confused as he faced Vegeta. Izuku, you're saying that as if you're going to leave right this second? Wait. Vegeta smirked as he nodded. Vegeta, I'm leaving you now. You took my most important lesson and did it. That form I took can be taken by any being, you just need to perfect your destruction and embrace your true instincts. Izuku, what does that mean? Vegeta shrugged as he took off someone gold from his ear before chucking it to Izuku. Vegeta, I dunno, it's different for each person. But here, take this. Stick it on your ear. It's a symbol for those who can use destruction. Now make sure you don't stop growing and prove that the technique of the destroyers will forever outclass that of Bakugou's. Izuku, I know, I have zero intention on losing to Bakugou. Vegeta smirked before putting 2 fingers on his head and teleporting out of sight, leaving Izuku now to fend for himself. Izuku looked at his phone and took a look at Vegeta's contact. None of the messages would send, which made Izuku smirk. Izuku, thanks for everything, he said as he put the gift that Vegeta gave him on his left ear. After that, some post came through the door. Knowing what this was, Izuku picked it up and walked to his room before opening it. Inside was a small device which then showed a hologram of Nizu. Nizu, it is I, the principal. How are you, Vegeta? If you're seeing this, then I assumed you fixed the family issue to some degree. We can discuss that another time though, as we both know, you passed the test with flying colors. You actually came first in the practical test with 110 points. 50 villain points and 60 hero points. Your class will be Class 1A. I wonder how you'll fare in there. Classes start tomorrow. And just like that, the device turned off as Izuku smirked. Izuku, you knew I'd pass, didn't you, V-sensei? Vegeta looked up to the deep void of space while on his planet. His arms crossed as he smirked. Vegeta, don't slack off on your training, Izuku, get stronger. And become the #1 hero. Izuku, 71. 72, 73. Currently Izuku was in the gravity chamber doing push-ups, not handstand or one-armed push-ups though, since it was in 10 times gravity. Even though it had been 10 years since he had been introduced to 10 times gravity, it still strained his body. Not as much albeit, but still enough to be noticeable, hence why he wasn't even in the hundreds when his arms buckled and crumbled. This made him fall face first onto the floor as he grunted in pain. Izuku, I need to do more. It was the day before UA started and Izuku had been pushing himself to the limit and beyond every single day. His main motivation? The possibility that Katsuki was doing more than him. He pushed himself back into the push-up position as he forced himself to keep going. Katsuki, HY. He yelled out. He was currently in the Yagi's backyard trying to make the biggest explosion he can. He infused OFA into his explosions at about 5% as he put both his hands out. The target was All Might, who blocked the attack, though he was pushed back. After the attack, Katsuki was panting hard. All Might, incredible, you're growing at a fine rate, Katsuki. Katsuki? Of course it's clear Deku cheated somehow, but I refuse to lose to him. I'll show him just how far beneath me he is. On the other side of the backyard, Izumi's eyes were closed as she had both her arms outstretched. A mini tornado of grass, dirt and worms was forming in front of her as she was sweating. The tornado was about 10 feet tall and it was taking a lot out of her. She kept it for about 15 more seconds before it collapsed. Inko, wonderful dear. You truly are getting strong. Izumi, I'll make sure Izuku doesn't leave us again. Katsumi and Shoka were currently training against each other. Katsumi had just fired an explosion at Shoka's ice which completely shattered it. Shoka, you're getting stronger. Katsumi, of course I am. You're not doing too bad though, she said as she used her explosions to propel herself into Shoka, who fired a punch at Katsumi, both of them being knocked to the floor. Katsumi, we haven't seen Izu since he saw his family. Recon he's okay? Shoka, he's Izuku, we'll see him at UA tomorrow and then we can ask if he'll take us to his new place. Katsumi, you're right. I know he's being smart. Izuku laid flat on the floor. He had done 105 push-ups and did 5 minutes of practicing his fighting. He had just about managed to turn off the gravity before passing out. Morning had come. Izuku realized this the moment he saw the sun cast through the gravity chamber. He groaned as he closed his eyes again. Izuku. UA starts today. He yelled to no one as he got up and rushed out, running around the house with toast in his mouth while he got changed into his school uniform. It outlined his muscle but not too much. It just let people know that he was someone not to be taken lightly. Izuku, let's show Katsuki what for, he said to himself with a sheet-eating grin before running to school, making sure the gold earpiece of a destroyer was on his ear. Give it about 10 minutes and he had ran through he gate. He was stood outside his class's door as he sighed. Likely the hero class with the most ability. He opened the door and immediately sighed. Ida, don't put your legs on the desk. Don't you think that it's disrespectful towards your previous upperclassmen? Katsuki, nah actually, so which school are you from extra? Izumi was sat next to Katsuki, who just giggled at his insult. Meanwhile, 3 people's eyes lit up when they saw Izuku enter. One of those was made immediately clear as Katsumi used her explosions to propel herself to Izuku and tackle-hugged him to the floor. Katsumi, why haven't you messaged UD-? Shoka, nice to see you Izu. Izuku just giggled at how different they were as he stood up, but a third one stood in between those two as she timidly spoke. Uraraka, I just wanted to say, thank you for saving me in the exam. Izuku just smirked as he nodded. He hadn't ever been thanked by someone for saving them before, so this was a new feeling to him. He quite liked it though. Without warning though, Katsuki walked up to Izuku, only an inch between them as he used his hands to make explosions. Katsuki, what dirty effing trick did you use to pass the exam, you shitwai Deku? Ida, please do mind the language. Katsumi, calm the F down Katsuki. Katsuki, shut up beach. You threw your dignity away the moment you got with Deku. Same as you half and half. Shoka just stayed silent, not really offended as Izuku didn't look intimidated. In fact, he glared at Katsuki as he spoke with utter confidence. Izuku, what? You scared that I've surpassed you? A useless Deku? You should be. I've won the right to be here, and if you can't handle that then maybe you should F off. A bunch of O's could be heard throughout the class as a tick mark made its way onto Katsuki's head. Before he spoke again though, Izuku walked past Katsuki. Katsuki, can't even back up all that talk, huh? Izuku, nah, but the teacher's here, Izuku said as he sat in front of Shoka and behind Katsumi, pointing to the door as a man in a sleeping bag was there. Aizawa. He could sense I was behind him? Aizawa didn't spend long thinking to himself, however, as he soon stood up. Aizawa, if you're here just to socialize and throw threats at each other, then leave. This is the UA Hero course, not the local pub. Everyone else quietened down after he stood up and spoke, wondering what he was supposed to be. He took their silence as an opportunity to continue. Aizawa, it took most of you 8 seconds to quiet down. Life is short, kids. You're all lacking in common sense. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shoto Aizawa. The class was more than shocked that he was a teacher. However, during this time he pulled out 21 UA hero uniforms and threw them at everyone. Aizawa, put these on and then meet me at the P. grounds. Currently getting changed, there was tension in the air. Mainly between Izuku and Katsuki, everyone knew it. Katsuki was noticeably fuming, but Izuku didn't have a single care in the world. When Izuku removed his shirt though, some of the people around him gasped. Sure, there was a great physique, but there were several burns and scars across his body. Kirishima, whoa dude. How did you get all those manly scars? Ida, it is improper to ask someone something so personal. I apologize for his behavior, Ida said as he bowed towards Izuku, who just shrugged. Izuku, Nah, it's fine, there ain't much to them really. Half of them were bullies and half were training. Kirishima, training? You gotta fill me in sometime, dude. Izuku simply nodded with a small smirk as Katsuki clicked his tongue before leaving for the grounds like everyone else. Most of Class 1A, a quirk apprehension test? Uraraka, what about the ceremony? Aizawa didn't seem to care as he started to walk towards a baseball pitch. Aizawa, if you want to be a hero, you don't have time for those things. You all understand the school's reputation for freedom on campus. Well, that freedom goes for us teachers as well. While everyone saw this as a possible hellish experience, Izuku simply saw it as how Vegeta had always taught him. In fact, he was already stretching. Kirishima, how come you're stretching, dude? Izuku, he's productive on time, right? So we should get ready as soon as possible. Aizawa, correct, Izuku. You got first in the entrance exam, so dash. Katsuki, you're the who got first. How did you do that, nerd? He shouted out as orange lightning surrounded him, using that to propel himself at Izuku quite quickly with a punch. Aizawa managed to nullify his quirk, so when Izuku just caught Katsuki's punch he was confused. Katsuki, why the F didn't my quirk activate? Aizawa, I erased it, you shouldn't be attacking other students. Do it once more and I'll expel you on the spot. Katsuki clicked his tongue once more as he walked back to where he was. Something was off. Most people his age wouldn't have even been able to react to that, yet Izuku did it without even breaking a sweat. What was up with him? Aizawa, as I was saying, since you got first in the exam, throw this softball. Do whatever you want as long as you don't leave the circle. Izuku nodded as his lovers wished him good luck. He wondered what to do. He couldn't use any destruction or ki blast since it would likely destroy the ball. Izuku, I'll just use ki then. He muttered to himself as a white glow started to come off his body, then it exploded into one that went about 1 inch to 2 inches off his body. Izumi, you see that Katsuki? Katsuki, how the F is he doing that? He's quirkless? Shoka and Katsumi smirked at their frustration as Izuku then pulled his arm back and threw the ball at full strength. It got sent real far as a small gust of wind came off the throw. It took a few moments before Aizawa pulled out his phone showing a distance of 950 meters. Aizawa, before anything else, one must know what they are capable of. This is a rational test that will form the basis of your hero foundation. Katsuki clenched his fists in anger. How the F was Izuku able to throw it that hard? Mina, awesome. That looks so fun. Aizawa, it looks fun, you say? So you were planning on spending your 3 years having a good old time? What happened to becoming heroes? All right then. In that case, new rule. Whoever comes last will be judged as hopeless and be immediately expelled. The class gasped except for those confident in themselves, that being Izuku, Katsuki, Katsumi, Izumi and Shoka. Uraraka, the kid who gets last is expelled. This is our first day here. But even if it weren't, that's too unreasonable. Just as Aizawa was about to speak after an annoyed sigh, Izuku spoke as he was walking back. Izuku, tell me, what's fair about a villain attack? What's fair about natural disasters? What's fair about kids with abusive parents? What's fair about the people with bad quirks who are just written off in society? Japan is full of unfair things, we just have to combat it? Aizawa, perfectly said, that is plus ultra after all. Test 1. The 50-meter dash. People were getting different scores, some had speed so they got pretty good. Izumi used her telekinesis to float to the other side at about 4.76 seconds. Katsumi was able to get 4.13 seconds. Shoka propelled herself on the ice and got 4.50 on the D. Next was Izuku versus Katsuki. Izuku knew he probably couldn't outspeed him, especially with All Might's quirk. Katsuki flung himself forwards with both quirks and got a time of 3.63 seconds while Izuku got 4.02 seconds. Katsuki, take that Deku. Izuku however was already walking and talking with Shoka and Katsumi. Katsuki, he's effing dead. Test 2, the grip strength test. Izumi wasn't great physically so she only got 51 kilograms. Katsumi used her explosions while tightening it and got 78 kilograms. Shoka wasn't great physically either and only got 53 kilograms. Katsuki used both quirks again and got 118 kilograms. Izuku, I can show off I guess, destruction is perfect here. Izuku clenched it and infused it with ki and destruction, completely shattering the machine and getting a score of infinity by technicality. Zero, you broke it? Holy shit. Katsuki was fuming even more as Katsumi and Shoka celebrated him getting the highest score. The tests went by just like that until the ball threw. So far Izuku had won 4 of the tests while Katsuki only won 3. It infuriated him. He was going to go 100% and break his arm. Aizawa, finally, Katsuki Bakugou? Katsuki nodded as he went to the circle, channeling 100% OFA into his right arm along with boosting his explosions. Aizawa noticed too late and couldn't deactivate his quirk. Katsuki, die! He shouted as he launched it extremely far, shocking everyone. Izuku, he was holding back? No. His arm, he can't handle All Might's quirk it seems. Katsuki's score was 13,568 meters, surprising no one. However, his arm was noticeably shattered. Aizawa, time to present the final results. The total is simply the additive sum of how well you did on each test. 1. Izuku Vegeta. 1. Katsuki Bakugou. 3. Momo Yaoyorozu. 4. Izumi Yagi. 5. Shoka Todoroki. 6. Katsumi Bakugou. 7. Ida Tenya. 8. Fumikage Tokoyami. 9. Mezu Shoji. 10. Mashireo Ojiro. 11. Ijiro Kirishima. 12. Mina Ishido. 13. Ochako Uraraka. 15. 16. 17. Yuga Aoyama. 18. Hantasiro. 19. Denki Kaminari. 20. Kyukajire. 21. Toru Hagakure. 22. Minoru Mineta. Aizawa, since the top 2 got the same amount of positions all together, they tied. Oh yeah, the whole expulsion thing was a lie. It was a rational deception. And this got most the class in uproar as Izuku simply laughed. Izuku, the look on Ida's face is priceless. No offense, Sonic. He joked as Aizawa gave a slip to Katsuki. Aizawa, go to Recovery Girl and get yourself patched up. By the way, no one likes a show-off. Class dismissed. Izuku was currently heading out the gate with Katsumi and Shoka. He had promised to show them where he lived and he planned to do just that. Katsumi, I may spend a lot of time here since Katsuki is insufferable. Hope you don't mind Izu. Izuku simply wrapped an arm around Katsumi's waist and pulled her next to him as he spoke. Izuku, of course I don't mind Sumi. He slightly flirted back, the teaching of Vegeta making Katsumi blush a bit as Shoka held his other hand. Shoka, I may do the same as sometimes my father can be a pain. Izuku of course didn't know that her father was abusive. If he did then all hell may break loose. Izuku, I'll happily have you as well. Anyone would be an idiot to refuse a beauty like you. He flirted to her, making Shoka blush in turn as Izuku giggled at the response. Soon they pulled up to Izuku's place as they looked in awe. Katsumi, Jesus F-. You hit the jackpot, babe. Shoka, it is quite impressive. Izuku, thanks, there's a training chamber and everything. Wanna practice with each other? They both nodded as Izuku showed them around the house first, then they would be shown the hell that Izuku called training. Third-person POV. Katsumi, that's where you train daily? I still don't believe you. Currently the trio were sat in the school cafeteria. It was lunch, the period before heroics. They were all looking forwards to it, truth be told, while some were nervous at the possibility of another expulsion. Izuku wasn't worried, both due to confidence and due to knowing that Aizawa was like Vegeta. He was strict but a nice guy in his own logic. Izuku, believe it or not, it's just how awesome on that. Shoka, seconded. They all giggled at Shoka's shameless comment as Izuku felt someone staring daggers into the back of his head. All Might, I am here. Coming through the door like a normal person. Students muttered over each other, all of them hyper over All Might as said hero glanced over the class. His eyes laid on Izuku, who looked like he couldn't care less. All Might, So he really did have some sort of quirk awakening. All Might cleared his throat to get everyone to quiet down and have them all pay attention. When the attention was gathered, he went into his usual deep, booming voice along with his overwhelmingly optimistic attitude. All Might, Foundational Hero Studies. For this case, we'll be building up your hero foundations through various trials. Let's jump right in with this. He then took his hand out of the box as a massive piece of card saying Battle in bold letters was plastered across it. All Might, the Trial of Battle. Everyone had different reactions to this news, however everyone was curious at how the class's top 2 would react. It was as they would expect. Katsuki, the trial? Izuku, of battle? Katsuki/Izuku, he's going down. All Might then got a remote from his pocket and pressed a button as boxes seemed to come out of the walls. All Might, and to go with your first battle, we've prepared the hero costumes that you sent in to go with your quirks. Everyone rushed up to the wall to grab their costumes. People were kicking and grabbing as they all soon got their designated number. All Might, get changed and we'll be ready to go. Everyone gather at Battlegrounds Beta. The garb you bring into the battlefield is vitally important, boys and girls. Izuku was sat down on Beerus's planet, scribbling down some ideas onto some paper before gasping. He scrunched it up and destroyed it using his destruction powers as he saw Vegeta walk up to him. Immediately Izuku dashed over to Vegeta and spoke. Izuku, I have an idea for a hero costume finally. Vegeta gave an egotistical smirk as he folded his arms, looking at Izuku curiously. Vegeta, oh? And what may that be? Kirishima, cool costume man? A slightly darker version of Vegeta's battle armor, with the god earring on as well. Izuku gave a proud nod to Kirishima as he spoke back. Izuku, thanks. It does serve a purpose along with being a homage to someone I hold dear. Vegeta, you wish to use my battle armor? Paying tribute is fine, don't copy my style though. Come up with something of your own. Change the color. Change the blue or something. Kirishima, so manly. Mine's more so just for aesthetic. Izuku, nothing wrong with that. Sharing a mutual understanding, they nodded at each other as they were the last ones out. Everyone else was already there in their canon hero costumes. Katsumi basically had Katsuki's exact same costume, and Izumi's costume was akin to that of Tatsumaki from One Punch Man. Except she wore underwear and some skin-colored tights with it. All Might, let's see what you're made of, you embryos. It's time for the trial of battle. Izuku walked up to Katsumi and Shoka, who seemed to be speaking to Uraraka. All of them completely blanking All Might as Uraraka gasped. Uraraka, that's your costume. It's really cool. I should have been more specific. I didn't expect it to be so skin-tight. Katsumi, we got looks at the design beforehand. Shoka, go us. They laughed at how Shoka said that in her usual stoic voice. However, when All Might coughed to make them pay attention, they then did so. Even if Izuku had no respect for All Might as a person, he was still his teacher. All Might, this will be an indoor battle trial. This got everyone ohing and ahing out loud. Whereas Izuku was trying to think of the reason in his head before All Might could explain it. Alas, he wasn't given enough time to do so. All Might, villain cleanup is usually seen out in the open, but statistically, the better part of it is an indoor job. Most acts of villainy are committed indoors. Imprisonment, house arrest, the black market, in this hero-saturated society. Why, any villain with intelligence is lurking in the shadows. For this test, you'll be separated into villain and hero groups. For a 2-on-2 team battle. All Might, now that all the questions are out of the way, let's start this. Team A, Izuku and Ochiko. Team B, Shoka and Katsumi. Team C, Mineta and Yaoyorozu. Team D, Katsuki and Ida. Team E, Mina and Aoyama. Team F, Koda and Sato. Team G, Kaminari and Jair. Team H, Tokoyami and Azui. Team I, Ojiro and Hakigure. Team J, Siro and Kirishima. Team K, Izumi and Shoji. Uraraka, wow, we must be linked or something. Pleased to have you. Izuku, At least it's someone bearable. They both chuckled at the comment as All Might coughed once more to get everyone's attentions. He had 2 boxes in front of him which he put his hands into. All Might, and the first 2 pairs to do combat will be Team A and Team D. Everyone including All Might stayed silent as they inspected Katsuki and Izuku, both of them smirking to themselves at the chance to prove each other to the other. The tension could be cut with a knife as Katsuki had his group of supporters and Izuku had his group of supporters. All Might. This scenario has the villains inside the hideout first. Then, after 5 minutes, the heroes will be led in as well. Everyone else will be able to watch through the surveillance cameras. This will allow young Bakugou and Ida to get the inside the heads of villains. This is a practical training exercise. So go all out without risk of injury. Though naturally we'll cut it short if things get out of hand. Both Katsuki and Izuku stayed silent as Katsuki and Ida walked into the building. Izuku and Uraraka were forced to wait outside for 5 minutes. With Izuku and Uraraka, they were looking at the map of the place as they made small talk to each other. Uraraka, a layout map of the building. Guess we have to commit it to memory. It doesn't seem like there are any penalties like Aizawa's though, so I'm relieved. Plus All Might will cut in if things get bad. Izuku, not for me. Uraraka, huh? Izuku had remained oddly silent up until now, his muscles clenching as he curled both his hands into fists, his nails almost piercing hard enough to draw blood. Izuku, if Katsuki and I are in a battle and it goes too far, he won't stop it. Even if he does, Katsuki won't stop. It'll be a battle until one of us pass out and we both know it. All Might is playing favorites as well with Katsuki, and as much as I don't want to admit it, it's well deserved. Uraraka tilted her head at this, curious as to what Izuku could mean. It didn't seem like it'd take him long to explain though. Izuku, his strength, ambitions, his quirk, his confidence, they are the real deal. But I don't want to lose. I won't lose. Izuku, especially with All Might's quirk in his back pocket, if he hits me with one of those attacks that broke his arm, I'm unsure if I'd survive. Uraraka stayed silent for a moment in response before gasping and speaking in her usual optimistic tone. Uraraka, so this must be fate then. The bonds between rivals. Izuku, huh? I suppose. Sorry for saying all this stuff that has nothing to do with you. Uraraka, it does too. We're a team, aren't we? Let's both do our best. Izuku found himself softly smirking at the comment as he fist-bumped Uraraka, both of them staying in a comfortable silence as they waited for the signal to head on in, that of which they were soon given. Uraraka, would they hide the bomb high up? Izuku, probably. Ida actually has a normal functioning brain. Katsuki is going to come after me and completely ignore you. So I'll stay on the first floor so you don't get hurt. You should levitate yourself up to the top floor and infiltrate from there. We'll keep in touch on the ear devices. Uraraka, sounds good. I'll see you when you beat Katsuki. Izuku genuinely smiled at that as Uraraka tapped herself and floated to one of the higher-up windows. Izuku took a deep breath as he walked into the main front door. He didn't run or carefully look around. Instead he walked with confidence while tapping into himself to feel everyone's ki. He currently couldn't do it far, but he could cover the entire building. Hence how he sensed Aizawa the day before. Katsuki was already on the 3rd floor and rapidly approaching. So Izuku continued to walk to the middle of the bottom floor as he waited. With All Might and Co. Everyone watched the match curiously, though a few questions were raised as Izuku just stood still with his eyes closed in the middle of the 1st floor. Kirishima, what's he doing? Is it part of a plan? Sensing no disrespect in him, Shoka nodded as she stood next to him and calmly explained her theory. Shoka, he and Katsuki have a rivalry, to put it lightly. I assume he's luring him out so Uraraka has a safe path to the bomb. At least, that's what it looks like. Back with Izuku. A minute after Izuku arrived in the middle, he could hear explosions rapidly approaching. He tensed his muscles and prepared to counterattack. Katsuki came from behind him, using his explosions to propel him forwards as he was about to launch a sneak attack on Izuku. Just as Katsuki slammed his hand forwards to release an explosion, Izuku flipped onto his hands and kicked Katsuki's arm upwards, having the explosion hit the ceiling as Izuku jumped forwards. He then turned around and opened his eyes to face Katsuki. Katsuki, don't dodge me, you damn Deku. Izuku, he's here. Izuku muttered to his earpiece, hearing a hum from the other side as he and Katsuki stared each other down. Nothing but pure hatred in their eyes for the other as a faint purple aura surrounded Izuku, while a multitude of explosions surrounded Katsuki's palms. Katsuki, where'd you pick up your fancy new quirk, Deku? Not like it matters. Suddenly, Izuku burst forwards, leaving cracks in the floor as Katsuki's eyes widened. Just as Izuku punched, it hit Katsuki's block as he tooted. Izuku, trust me Katsuki, this is far better than any quirk you've seen. Katsuki's eyes widened as he felt the same vibrations from Izuku as when he was about to use an explosion. Feeling this, he jumped into the air to dodge what turned out to be an explosion of ki. Katsuki then propelled himself downwards at Izuku as said ki user jumped backwards, then seeing that Katsuki's pursuit didn't let up. So Izuku jumped forwards and clashed fists with him on an equal manner, shocking Katsuki as Izuku smirked, leaning backwards before head-butting him in the forehead, making him gasp in pain. Katsuki stumbled backwards as a result as Izuku rubbed off the pain on his end, charging in as he went to slam his fist into Katsuki's head. Katsuki, he swiped his head to the side just before Izuku's punch landed, instead hitting the wall as it cracked a little bit from the force. Wasting no time, Katsuki put both his hands out and used his explosions, sending Izuku backwards with a gust of smoke following. Katsuki, how'd you like that, Deku? Izuku simply swiped away the smoke though as he used his other hand to dust off his armor which had a few scratches on it. Izuku, probably as much as you'll like this. Katsuki, like W dash. Izuku then rapidly brought his arm up and fired a ki blast at Katsuki which he didn't have time to dodge, bringing his arms up in an X shape to barely block it in time. A small explosion being made as a result. Katsuki, ga? You're effing dead. Izuku, not if you die first. All Might, the hero team wins this. As Uraraka had managed to get to the weapon with some pocketed rubble thanks to Izuku's suggestion, Ida turned to face her and shook her hand. Ida, even with my preparations your brilliance shone through. A well-deserved victory on your part. Uraraka just giggled at his formalities before shaking his hand in return. Uraraka, thanks. Though it was Deku's thinking, where is he? The floor shook slightly as Uraraka and Ida looked around. Ida, what was that? Uraraka's face paled upon realization as she grabbed Ida's wrist and started to run off. Ida, hey? Katsuki, you've pissed me off. Neither of them had heard the alert. Their earpieces had broken due to the explosions. Katsuki used his explosions to propel himself forwards before slamming his fist downwards on Izuku with an explosion. Izuku tooted as he planted his feet into the ground and putting his arms in a blocking motion. He was pushed backwards as he immediately propelled himself towards Katsuki who did the same. Their hands grabbed the other as each tried to overpower the other. Small explosions came out of Katsuki's and stung Izuku's hands, but his were stronger. Katsuki growled as an orange lightning surrounded him, his grip immediately growing considerably stronger as Izuku felt himself slipping. Without a second to waste, Izuku leant back before slamming his head into Katsuki's. Katsuki, fuck dash. Izuku didn't give him time to get himself together as he immediately brought his fist to Katsuki's nose, sending him into a wall. Izuku rushed towards him and drop-kicked Katsuki's stomach while in the wall, making him cough up blood. Before Izuku could move away, Katsuki grabbed his legs and swung him into the wall with extra momentum with his explosions. Izuku bit his lip in pain as he grabbed a chunk of the wall and threw it at Katsuki. Before it arrived, Izuku put his hand out in a gun formation and pretending like he was shooting the rubble. He then destroyed it with pure destruction, having Katsuki fly back from the wind pressure. Izuku used this chance to get up as he wiped some blood off of his forehead. Katsuki just about managed to stabilize his feet with OFA and his explosions as his pupils shrunk in rage. Izuku, what's with that look? Realized you're not top of the food chain? Rage clouded Katsuki's judgment as he put out his palm, He didn't even say anything, but he pulled the pin from his grenade as Izuku's eyes widened. Izuku, CT. Izuku put both his arms out as a purple barrier of ki surrounded him. Immediately upon impact it cracked and Izuku was pushed back. It didn't break though. Kaboo. Kirishima, why aren't you doing anything, sir? The match is over and that looks like it's going too far. All Might gritted his teeth as he watched the explosion wipe out the cameras. He couldn't get through to either of them due to the earpiece. All Might, I should, but Katsuki needs this. All Might, I'll step in if it gets any further. No one looked convinced as they shot him a worried glance, but he was the #1 hero, so why should they question him? Of course Shoka and Katsumi were sweating. They knew Izuku would be fine, but they felt it from quite far away. Uraraka, W. She cried out as she held onto a pillar for support, Ida barely able to hold his footing on the stairs as he spoke. Ida, is that Bakugou? Uraraka, I think that's Deku as well. As they readjusted themselves, Ida looked out the window as his eyeballs bulged out their sockets in a comedic fashion. Ida, the building will come down if something like that happens again. We need to evacuate Uradash. Before he could finish, Uraraka sped past him. Uraraka, he saved me before? I can't just leave him. A large part of the corner of the building was missing. First, second and third floor had a corner blown off of it, any more unbalance and the building would collapse. Not that it mattered, both were too far in rage at this point. Well, Katsuki was. Izuku, you're not done yet, right? He shouted out as he maniacally smiled in his battle lust, lunging forwards as he didn't care for the slight burns on his arms. Adrenaline fueled him as his fist clashed with Katsuki's, both of them going back a little as a result. Immediately, Izuku pushed himself forwards with ki similar to how Katsuki does with his explosions before holding his hands out. The leftover pieces of rubble near Katsuki exploding due to destruction, a huge aftereffect causing the building to shake due to the antimatter. The building started to crumble as Katsuki shot an explosion upwards, clearing himself of any debris while sending more to Izuku who had to block with a barrier. Launching himself out the ground with 5% OFA, Katsuki started to spin himself with his explosions as he yelled out his move. Katsuki, howitzer impact. It shattered Izuku's barrier and continued to shake the building. Izuku went flying outside as he slammed into another building. Katsuki hot on his tail as Izuku forcefully slammed him back with a gust of ki, giving him time to come out into the open facing opposite of Katsuki. Katsuki's eye sockets were completely red as he lost all sense of reason due to rage. This nerd was still standing in front of him. Izuku's right pec and part of his stomach was showing due to some of his legs due to the explosions. Blood ran down his forehead as his sight was starting to blur. Yet all the same he smiled as a faint purple aura came off of him. Izuku-tmar? He charged at Katsuki quicker than before catching him off guard. This allowed Izuku to hit him with an uppercut sending him into the air. Blood came out of Katsuki's mouth as Izuku jumped into the air after him. He grabbed his arm and spun him around before having him land in the floor. Propelling himself with ki, he then found himself sledgehammering Katsuki's chest making him yell in pain. Izuku then jumped back with his battle lust-filled smirk as Katsuki slowly continued to get up. Just as Izuku was about to charge at him again, Uraraka, Izuku. Arms wrapped around behind him as he felt tears on his back. His purple aura soon faded as he growled due to the pain setting in. Izuku, Uraraka? W-. Before he could say much more, he heard the second out of 2 pins get pulled. Not having time to dodge and protect himself due to Uraraka, he put his arms out front and summoned that barrier of ki. Kahum. Smoke filled the area as Uraraka slowly opened her eyes. In front of her stood a completely shirtless Izuku. Izuku, you're not injured? Good. Immediately his eyes closed as he fell backwards. As Uraraka dodged his body, her face paled. He had 2 black eyes along with burns across his body. As if that wasn't enough, his right arm was broken and blood was covering his body. Katsuki, how'd you like that, Deku? I won. As the dust settled though, the technicalities of his victory settled in. Izuku gave Katsuki the win so Uraraka wouldn't get hurt. A feeling far more than rage filled Katsuki as he charged at Uraraka with his explosions, but he immediately fell to the floor due to lack of strength. He was still conscious though. Katsuki, you beach. You ruined my victory, you effing whore. I would have dashed. Before he could say anything else, he passed out from his injuries and the adrenaline dying down. As he passed out, several people arrived on the scene. Izumi, Shoka, Katsumi, All Might, Ida and several robots who were immediately picking up Izuku and Katsuki. As Shoka and Katsumi looked at Izuku's condition, they paled slightly, but their mood slightly brightened when that saw that Katsuki was in the same place. Feeling obligated to, Uraraka went up to them and spoke nervously. Uraraka, why you're Deku's friends, right? Katsumi, huh? Yeah. You were his partner, right? Shoka, she was. Ochako Uraraka. Uraraka gulped nervously as she looked to the ground. Uraraka, I didn't butt in. Izuku wouldn't have lost, he wouldn't have taken that hit if, sniff. She started to wipe her tears as Katsumi slowly approached her. When Uraraka braced herself to be hit, she only found herself being hugged. Katsumi, you idiot. Izuku would have broken his body beyond repair if you hadn't intruded. Yeah, I'm pissed that Katsuki beat him, but your team won the exercise, right? Plus he's definitely gonna get the works from Aizawa. She said, laughing at the end as Shoka simply nodded. Letting go of Izuku's hand as the robots put him on a stretcher and took him to the medical ward. Shoka then walked up to the duo and spoke. Shoka, him and Katsuki are gonna be treated in different rooms. Probably for the better. Yaoyorozu, the best in this match was likely Uraraka. Uraraka, Ichuch? Really? You don't have to be so modest. Currently it was just the students. All Might had asked Yaoyorozu, who was number 1 besides Katsuki and Izuku, to monitor the class. It had been suspended until further notice due to how that match went. Ida, but she isn't. You won the match first off, on top of that you went to help your teammate when he was in danger, didn't you? Without regards for how you may be hurt, the mark of a true hero. And for the second time that day, Uraraka cried. She cried and no one minded. Izumi would have, but she had left with All Might to go and check on the injured students. Katsuki. Recovery girl, why didn't you stop them? Recovery girl hit All Might with her walking cane as he coughed up blood, back into his skinny form as he stood before her in Izuku's room. All Might, apologize. Recovery girl, don't apologize to me. Seriously, Bakugou's wounds are bad enough, but Vegeta's are on a whole other level. It's a miracle he had so much stamina left after that, or I wouldn't have been able to heal him. All Might had to hold back on correcting her as to how it was Yagi and not whatever Vegeta was, but he held back for now. Nizu, it is a mystery, yes. Perhaps his quirk is part of the reason he had enough stamina to be healed. Both the staff turned their heads to see Nizu walking into the room. A look of shock on their faces as All Might spoke first. All Might, Budash? Nizu, he clearly isn't quirkless. No matter how much you want to argue that fact. He told me himself and I've seen what footage I can. Before either of the staff could continue talking, the heart rate monitor picked up as Izuku's eyes opened before he sat up. Recovery girl, how are you awake already? It's only been an hour, nonetheless you need rest. Izuku, and I'll get rest. I'll just do it at my place. I don't feel like being in the same room as this cunt, he said as he glanced at All Might, a shocked expression coming from Recovery Girl, yet it seemed like it didn't surprise Nizu in the slightest. All Might, Izuku, that's no way to speak to your father. Izuku, oh sorry, would you rather I said All Might then? At this, the room fell silent as All Might wondered how his secret leaked. To his knowledge he had never told Izuku he was All Might. Izuku, besides, you're not my father. Not after everything you've done. All Might, I've done not dash. Nizu had his iPad pulled up before he started to list off several things. Nizu, if we're not including your selfish ego of one for all successor resulting in these injuries, then there is still quite a number. Is around a decade of neglect and abuse, favoritism among children, starvation of your child, mental abuse to the point of almost driving Vegeta to suicide, all because he was quirkless no less. Did I miss anything, Vegeta? Izuku, nah, that covered basically everything. Of course, if you still want to deny this, then we can take you to a lie detector quirk. At this, All Might fell silent, unsure of how he could combat this. Recovery girl, this is true, isn't it? Why isn't he in prison and why is he working here? Izuku, as much as I want that bastard in prison, his existence alone decreases crime by a drastic margin. On top of that, if we're talking about purely public heroism, he can't be beat. I would have loved All Might as a dad, but I got Toshinori. The students have All Might though, that's why he's here, along with giving Katsuki favoritism. Nizu, any rebuttals to that, Toshinori? All Might. None. Nizu, the day of the exams, Vegeta stated he's happy to keep quiet about this. He doesn't want you to have custody of him anymore in return. If you don't agree to those terms, we will have to unfortunately put you to trial. All Might looked to the floor as he clenched his fists before letting them go and slowly nodding. All Might, for what it's worth is dash. Izuku, it's Vegeta to you. All Might, right? Vegeta, for what it's worth, I am sorry, truly sorry. Izuku stayed silent as he stood up, moving the IVs off his shirtless self before walking past him. Izuku, actions are louder than words. I won't forgive Toshinori, just make sure All Might is a good and fair teacher from now on. And with that, Izuku left the room to leave the staff members in there. It was 4 p.m. when Izuku left the hospital ward of the school. The moment he did, he saw Uraraka nervously waiting outside as she gasped upon seeing him. Uraraka, Deku. You shouldn't be up this early. Izuku, I'm fine, just a bit drained. I assume you won us the exercise? Uraraka, oh yes. Thanks to your planning, I was able to take Ida by surprise. Izuku, I'm glad. Sorry I couldn't keep the end of my promise. As Izuku started to walk, Uraraka let out a hum of confusion as she followed him. Izuku, when you said when you beat him before we went into the building. I didn't win, sorry. Hearing this, Uraraka sighed as she walked side by side with Izuku and just looked down at her hands. Uraraka, well, you may have won if I hadn't gotten involved. Izuku just shook his head and held Uraraka's hand in a way of reassurance, that of course made her blush in result. Izuku, no, I needed you there. It wasn't in a controlled space. If I went any further I may have hurt someone I didn't mean to. Thank you. Uraraka's face turned bright red as they walked out the doors of the UA school. They saw Shoka and Katsumi waiting outside as they started to walk Uraraka to the train station. Izuku, so how did the rest of the matches go? Shoka, cancelled. All Might had to go to fill out some paperwork because of how injured you and Katsuki got under his watch. Katsumi, but man. I bet Katsuki's gonna be so pissed when he wakes up. Not only did he not get a true win, but he lost the exercise. Ha! Izuku just smirked at this as they arrived at the train station. Izuku, oh Uraraka. Before you go. He pulled out a slip from his pocket and quickly borrowed a pen from Shoka before writing down something and handing it to her. Izuku, here's my number if you ever want to ask or organize something. I'm either free or training most days after school. Uraraka, oh, thank you, she said with a bow as Shoka and Katsumi shot each other a knowing glance. The doors to the train then closed as she disappeared from view. Izuku. Anyone down for some katsudon? Katsuki sat up gasping hard. He seemed to be in his tattered hero suit and was covered in several bruises. Looking at the clock, it was 8 p.m. Was he out for that long? What happened? He only remembered Katsuki, Deku. The moment he tried to get up and leave, he found himself caught in some sort of alloy-like scarf. Turning to his left, Mr. Aizawa seemed to be there with an annoyed expression. Aizawa, we're going to talk about why you tried to end your classmate? 2 days had passed since the hero versus villain exam. Katsuki hadn't been in during those days and Izuku only came back in yesterday due to his injuries. Today though was different, both of them were in today and Katsuki sent a glare towards Izuku who shrugged it off. Katsuki still had a few plastered and bandages over him but Izuku was fully clear of medical needs and treatment now, much to the shock of Recovery Girl, which was a bit of a hit on Katsuki's pride. Before any tension in the class could rise up, Aizawa walked into the classroom which stopped any and all conversations whether it be related to the duo or not. Aizawa, For the foundational skills of heroics we'll study today, it was decided you'll be supervised by a 3-man team comprising me, All Might, and somebody else. Never one to take his time, always to the point. Izuku appreciated that though, it reminded him of Vegeta in a way. Izuku, what'll we be doing that needs this though? He casually asked as Aizawa held up a card that said Rescue in big, bold letters. Aizawa, be the hero everyone needs, whether it's a floor or other disaster, a trial of rescue. Conversations started flooding the room as the students wondered what they'd be suited for, how much they were looking forwards to it. Some were preferring battle training but none seemed actually opposed to this minus Katsuki. Aizawa, don't get ahead of yourselves. He clicked a remote which had the boxes for everyone's hero costume come out of the wall. Aizawa, as I was saying, it's entirely up to you if you wear your hero costume this time around or not. Some of your costumes likely aren't adapted to the issue at hand after all. The training is fairly far away, so we'll be going by bus. That's all. So get prepared. Currently everyone was walking to the bus. All were in their hero costumes, though Uraraka could have sworn she saw Izuku shirtless in front of her after the explosion. Uraraka, wait, shirtless? He was? Her face turned bright red as she covered her face with her hands and accidentally began to float away. Mina, she's escaping. She comedically called out, though also said it to get everyone's attention. Before anyone else, Izuku jumped up about 20 feet, which was luckily as far as she had gotten before holding her wrist so she'd stay planted. Izuku, you should probably deactivate your quirk. He teased with a soft smirk as her blush stayed, but she slowly nodded. Her weight came back as Izuku let go of her wrist. Katsumi, hey Aizu. Katsumi swung herself forwards and hugged Izuku from the back, wrapping her legs around him as she traced her finger over his pec of his hero costume. Katsumi, I swore this got blown off against the battle against Katsuki, did they fix it already? Izuku, nah, they're still fixing the other. My sensei gave me 7 in total though since he knew stuff like this would happen. Shoka, right? Who even was this sensei? You've mentioned him countlessly and yet never told us about him. A question Izuku didn't expect. Who was his sensei without giving away one of the biggest secrets of the universe? Well, it only took a moment because Izuku's answer appeared immediately. Izuku, my sensei was a warrior. A true hero. He was what I would call a true father figure. No one can nor ever will beat him, and for that reason, I have to make sure I'm the same. Kirishima and Uraraka let out little woes in amazement as Katsuki just glared at Izuku from behind. This sensei of his had made this pebble in his path an absolute obstacle to overcome. An annoying one at that. As they all lined up to the bus, Ida went full throttle to decide where everyone would sit. Ida, what a terrible defeat. Mina, all that prep just for it to be the wrong bus? Of course Aizawa sat at the front seat, driving said bus. However, the other students just sat where they saw fit. Katsuki and Izumi sitting in one of the back corners, our main trio sat next to each other in the middle happy to be social, and our adorable round face in denial of love sitting opposite Izuku. Tsu, hey Vegeta. I always say what comes to my mind. Izuku, Go ahead. Tsu, what is your quirk? It can do several things. It can produce antimatter, you were able to make a barrier of energy, and you seem to have superhuman levels of speed and strength. Not to mention that endurance. You won against Bakugou. Katsuki, he didn't win. I outlasted him. Just because round face got in the way? He muttered the last part in anger as Izuku wondered to himself. He tried to make it seem like he was thinking about what his quirk actually was, but he was thinking of a way to explain away this natural power. Izuku, I think its name is wrong. The quirk is called destruction, which is where you may be mistaken. All I can do is manipulate most forms of energy to a high level. And that's how the bus ride was spent, everyone discussing their quirks. Everyone, it really is the... Everyone stared in awe at the unforeseen simulation joint, otherwise known as the USJ. Before them stood Aizawa and the rescue hero 13. No one other than Katsuki and Izuku heard the murmurs of Aizawa and 13. Aizawa, hey, 13, where's All Might? He should be here around this time. 13, from what I have been told, It looks as though he'd been out heroing while commuting until his time was up. Aizawa, he's the height or irritation. Well, let's start. With that, the teachers turned towards the group as 13 went on about her power, how it was used to save, but could easily end. It seemed to hit hard for most students. Those who were cold-blooded like Katsuki and Izumi simply didn't care, and Izuku. While knowing ending was against hero code, there sometimes wasn't a choice. Although 13 didn't mention that. Aizawa, all right for dash. Izuku, 45. 60. Aizawa, what are y dash? He turned to where Izuku was pointing and saw a purple spiral which soon turned into a portal. Several unique characters came out as Izuku visibly shuddered at once. In a hushed tone, Uraraka saw this and spoke. Uraraka, what's wrong? Is Vegeta? Izuku, that bird villain, his power is insane. Uraraka, really? Then why are you smiling? Before he could answer, Aizawa turned to the students in a voice filled with panic yet a high tone of authority. Aizawa, huddle together and don't move. 13 protect the students. There was easily over 120 villains in the center. A few stood out though, the one who created the portals, the bird one that Izuku mentioned, and one covered with hands. Shigaraki, where is he? We went through all this trouble, and brought all these playmates to end, the symbol of peace. I wonder if some dead kids will make him show. Although he was talking to himself, everyone heard him. Aizawa put on his goggles as he got ready to head down there. Uraraka, Mr. Aizawa. There's too many of them. Your fighting style is surprise and one-on-one, capturing after you erase their quirks. Against that many? Aizawa, no hero is a one-trick pony. I'm a hero, so I'll protect you. Inspiring the battle-ready students, he jumped down the stairs and started his combat with the fodder villains. Many of the students were just stood there watching in awe. 13, this is no time to be watching. We must get you to safety. As they ran to the entrance, the same purple mist blocked them off. Kurogiri, there is no escape for you. It's a pleasure to meet you, we are the League of Villains. I know it's quaint but we decided to bring you here and end All Might. I believe he was supposed to be here today and yet there's no sign of him. Yet it doesn't matter, I still have a role to play. As the mist grew, Katsuki and Izuku rushed him. Explosions from Katsuki's side and a burst of energy from Izuku's. Unfortunately, due to them being on opposite sides, they only hit the left and right, missing the middle. Izuku, like hell if you think I'll let you do that. Katsuki, stay out my way Deku. He spat back as the dust cleared. Kurogiri's voice could be heard. Kurogiri, yes, students you may be, you still are heroes in training. He then enveloped them in a purple mist, only some dodging, and when Izuku blinked, he was falling to the water. He fell into the water as he looked around calmly, holding his breath as he realized he had been teleported. Izuku, must be a warping quirk, here to end All Might? That bird effer must be their trump card. As he swam up, deciding to save his energy, he saw a water villain swimming towards him. Before he had to fight back, Tsuyu saved him with Mineta in hand, bringing them both to the surface where there was some boat. Izuku, thanks Tsuyu. Tsuyu, this is turning out pretty bad. Izuku just nodded as he looked into the water, seeing several villains just glaring at them. Meanwhile, Tsuyu was telling Mineta the cold reality of the situation. Izuku, it's up to us, they likely don't know our quirks after all. Shoka, aren't you embarrassed to lose to a child? For God's sake you're adults, put up a real fight. Shoka had already frozen all the villains in the landslide zone in their tracks, frost coming off her body. Katsuki, huh? Katsuki yelled out as he started taking the initiative and fighting the villains in his area with Kirishima and Katsumi. Izuku, sure, using our quirks is against the law, but otherwise we'd likely die. So why not fight back? Tsuyu, sure. What's the plan? As he was about to speak, he was feeling everyone's ki in the dome. It took a bit of time but everyone seemed to be okay, except for Aizawa. While not heavily injured, he was running out of stem. Yet most the villains around him had been defeated. Izuku, Mr. Aizawa is gonna lose, so we have to be quick. Tsuyu, give me backup? Izuku jumped off the sinking boat and was rapidly descending to the villains in the water. He pulled back his left hand as a green hue came from it. Izuku, final shine attack. He yelled as he fired it to the center of them, creating a vortex of a whirlpool, the water current sucking them in. Seeing this as the cue, Tsuyu jumped off the boat with Mineta and wrapped her extended tongue around Izuku. Using his quirk, Mineta stuck them all together as the whirlpool then rose up from the pressure before exploding upwards. Tsuyu, not too shabby. They landed in the shallow water as they started to walk towards the center. Izuku, Aizawa is over this way, you two follow the shore to the entrance, I'll back up Mr. Aizawa. They both looked at him in protest, Mineta openly displaying his as Izuku glared at him. Izuku, I'm going. Get to the entrance. Before hearing anything more, he started to rush towards the center. Shoka, so the plan was to scatter us, and then end us? You were woefully unprepared. It looks to me as though you've had no training. You can barely even use your quirks. Izumi, hey. You took them out before I could do jack shit. Shoka stayed quiet as Izumi pouted behind her. She walked towards the frozen villains as one snuck up from behind. Izumi, I've got maybe not? The moment she spoke, Shoka turned around and froze the villain's entire body besides his face. Izumi. Well now, do we just wait for others to show? They can't attack us after all. Shoka, I have a better idea. Hey, listen well. Your bodies are frozen and your cells will slowly die of frostbite and hypothermia. Luckily for you, I wish to be a hero, so I'd like to avoid any unnecessary cruelty. It'd be a shame if you all died because you didn't give me information on how you plan to end All Might. Izumi. She scares me. Aizawa was still fighting, taking down the last of the fodder villains. Now starting to pant a bit as the villain covered with hands was charging at him, quite quickly as well. Aizawa shot out his scarf towards him, but he actually dodged as they both came towards each other. Aizawa landed a solid elbow on Shigaraki's stomach, however it seemed to have been caught by Shigaraki's hand. Shigaraki, it was hard to see when you were jumping around, but I found your tell, it's your hair. Whenever it falls it means you've stopped using your quirk. With that said, Aizawa's elbow started to crumble and disintegrate. Shigaraki, don't push yourself too hard now, you might just fall apart. As the skin on his elbow fell off and started to continue up his arm, he punched Shigaraki and jumped back. More fodder villains trying to catch him as with more effort than before, he dodged and took a few out. Shigaraki, that annoying quirk of yours isn't suited for drawn-out fights against large groups, isn't it? Don't you think you're a little out of your element here, Eraserhead? Using his talking as a distraction, Aizawa got his breath back while fighting more fodder and getting them down. Shigaraki, and look at you. After all that fighting, you're still standing. That's so cool. Oh, by the way, I'm not the final boss. As Aizawa turned around, his face was crushed by the bird creature's massive hand. His goggles flying off and blood dripping from his head. Nomu sat on Aizawa with his face down and arm held. Shigaraki, what do you think? He's the anti-symbol of peace. Call him Nomu. At the mention of that, Nomu snapped his arm with little effort, the yell coming from Aizawa being loud and filled with pain. Shigaraki, you can erase people's quirks. That's irritating but not impressive when faced with true power. Just as the Nomu was about to smash the other arm, a voice made it move. Shigaraki, Nomu, defend. Izuku was here, a small energy barrage being fired at Shigaraki, to which Nomu stood in front of him and blocked, leaving Aizawa on the floor. He was still conscious though as he looked at the student that had just saved him. Aizawa, Vegeta? Leave. This isn't your job. He tried to speak in the same commanding tone as before, however it didn't have the same effect when he was bloodied and injured. Izuku stood next to him as he jumped away from Nomu and Shigaraki. Izuku, I believe it was you who said I am a hero, so I'll protect you, right? Well, I need a teacher. I'm a hero in training, so I need you to live. Therefore, I'll protect you. The Nomu stared him down as Izuku took in a breath. Aizawa, his power, it's as strong as All Might's. Don't get why yourself ended. Shigaraki, he's right, you're no match for Nomu. Though you'll die one way or the other. The moment that was said, several things happened. First off, Nomu charged at unseen speeds over to Izuku. Next, Izuku had braced himself with a heavy barrier of energy. Finally, Aizawa used his quirk on the Nomu. It didn't change anything though. Within a moment, the Nomu's fist collided with Izuku's barrier and shattered it. The barrier wasn't useless though, it had slightly weakened the impact as its fist slammed into his stomach. Izuku coughed up blood. As he was about to go flying, he held onto Nomu's arms with a manic grin. Blood fell onto Nomu's arm as a white aura flowed around Izuku. His feet slammed into Nomu's face, empowered by energy/ki, the Nomu going back a few feet due to its quirks being nullified. Shigaraki tooted but wasn't overly concerned. Instead he just stood there, annoyed at this child. Izuku, you may be a good warm-up? He spat out as blood dribbled down his lips. Without hesitance Izuku dashed towards Nomu. The floor beneath him cracked as the Nomu cocked its fist back. Izuku did the same and slammed it against Nomu's, a yell of pain coming across him as the muscles in his arms screamed out in agony. Ki surged out of Izuku's fist akin to Endeavor's flash-fire fist. Taking this knockback from Nomu as a quick moment to recuperate, he shook his arm before clenching his teeth together and rushing forwards. Shigaraki, why does he not fear Nomu? He's clearly weaker than even Eraserhead, Aizawa, and yet, he's giving his all just to live. While the Nomu was still being pushed back, Izuku caught up and drop-kicked Nomu's chest. The lack of shock absorption making things complicated for the Nomu. As Izuku smirked, his sweat dropped as his legs were grabbed in Nomu's large hands. Like a rag doll, Nomu slammed down Izuku onto the floor. The impact cracked both the ground and his back as Aizawa cringed at the cry of pain that escaped Izuku's lips. And yet, Izuku didn't just accept the pain. His eyes bloodshot as he twisted his body and charged ki in his palm which faced the Nomu. Izuku, Hairfuck. Final shine attack. He yelled as the green energy blast from before attacked the Nomu and forced him back, making it let go of his legs. Shigaraki, he's cheating. While not a threat, his attack is stronger. The attack burned Nomu's chest a bit as Izuku looked at his outfit. Several tears at the legs from the Nomu. The Nomu was still mostly uninjured though as Shigaraki grimaced before scratching his neck. Shigaraki, Nomu, and Eraserhead for dash. Izuku, don't ignore me. Izuku was flying towards Nomu at even quicker speeds, sending a right hook to his bird head and sending him across the USJ a few feet. Before the Nomu could charge him, he put his hand out and fired a circular blue blast at the Nomu. Izuku, Big Bang Attack. Said blast made contact with the Nomu and made a large explosion, dust and smoke filling the area as Izuku panted, catching his breath. Aizawa, Vegeta, are you o-dash? The smoke changed direction as a blur sped past Izuku, a gasp escaping his lips as he looked towards Aizawa. Izuku, we can't win without him. Using most of his ki and putting it to his legs, he sped towards Aizawa and put his arms into an X formation as he felt the Nomu smash its fist into him. The air pressure alone sent Aizawa flying towards the entrance, only caught by Tsuyu's tongue as he grimaced. Aizawa, no! Vegeta is still down there? And yet, he couldn't move. Izuku had been flung back from the impact and landed against a wall of one of the areas. He was winded and was sat against the wall. His ribs felt like they were dislocated. He tried to get up, but felt someone's foot on his shoulder. Shigaraki, sure, you brought them a few extra seconds, but now you'll die. You're foolish. You will never defeat Nomu, it's impossible. You should just give up and accept your death. Izuku shook in fury at Shigaraki's taunting tone. Energy flowing off of him as he grabbed Shigaraki's ankle. Shigaraki's eyes widening as he glared at the boy. Izuku, give up? Give up? You get off of me. Izuku clenched onto Shigaraki's ankle harder and pushed him back with energy. His entire body hurt, but he slowly rose upwards. Izuku, maybe there was a time when I'd have given up, but that's all behind me now. Even if it means destroying myself. A flash of purple took over his aura and hair before it turned to its normal color. He was on his feet now as he slouched downwards, facing Shigaraki though. Izuku, I will destroy you. Shigaraki. Nomu charged at him, Izuku not able to move or counter in time as he faced his death head-on. "The F are you doing dying to someone who's not me?" The sound of explosions could be heard as an orange lightning of sorts surrounded it. It came flying in at rapid speeds. Katsuki, howitzer impact. He slammed into Nomu with extra speed that he shouldn't have. And explosions resonating throughout the USJ. It pushed Izuku back along with the Nomu. "Izuku, how?" "Izumi, you better thank me, brother." Izumi floated down with Katsumi, Shoka and Aizawa, who was glaring at the Nomu. "Katsumi, you won't let Katsuki outshine you, right?" "Shoka, get in there and end that thing, we'll support you." Izuku just smirked as he walked towards where Katsuki stood. Orange lightning spiraling off him as Izuku spoke. "Izuku, I won't allow myself to lose to anyone, and especially not you, Katsuki, so don't slow me down." "Katsuki, that's my line, you Deku." The Nomu stood a few meters away from them as it stared lifelessly into Katsuki and Izuku's eyes. Ki spilling off of Izuku and lightning radiating from Katsuki. "Shigaraki, Nomu, take them down." Third-person POV. The year is 21XX and the world has been taken over by the...
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.